Hi, this video is made possible thanks to your support, and it starts with the main character in the boys' dorm at Tsinghua College. One of the students tells him he's going on a date. Gao explained to the student with a smile that he was going to an interview and dressed in an authoritative style. Gao was considered one of the top students in the college physics department. The protagonist's phone rang. He reached into his pocket and picked up the device. The guy on the phone happily suggested that Gao come over for lunch. The guy happily opened the door. He said that people from the business department call their department a dead department. One of the students shouted to the surprised protagonist that he would have to revive the glory of the physics faculty. The main character was walking down the street. The guy made an appointment for him at 6 o'clock tomorrow at the Hot Pot restaurant. Gao promised to come. The protagonist was standing in the middle of the street. He saw the traffic light turn red. Gao reminded himself that he had his ID and resume. He needed to cross the alley and reach the subway station. He was going to an interview at Bai Corporation. The firm was renowned worldwide. The protagonist was 175 centimeters tall. He couldn't even afford an iPhone 5. His good looks weren't enough to even support himself. The boy heard a car honk its horn from the side of him, disgruntled. Gao turned around in displeasure and shouted at the unfamiliar driver that he had learned his manners from dogs. The door of the red racing car opened. The driver got out and told the protagonist in a disgruntled voice that he had just said her words. A stranger near the car. She looked angry. The protagonist studied her carefully. Gao noted that the driver looked beautiful even when she was angry. He smiled happily and thought that the girl had become a feast for his eyes. The stranger glared at the protagonist and shouted that she was talking to him right now. Gao thought angrily that the girl wasn't even letting him look at her. The driver angrily shouted at the guy that he now had to pay her for the damage. Gao calmly asked the girl why she was driving in such a narrow alley. He told her that he was not to blame for her mistakes. The driver got angry. She angrily asked the guy, whose fault was it? She reminded him that Gao had blocked her path and she had swerved to avoid hitting him. Gao glanced at the girl with fear. He thought that perhaps it was his fault too. He couldn't pay for the repairs to his expensive car. The protagonist ran up to the car and started cleaning it with his hands. He asked the driver not to worry. The driver stood to the side and watched as the guy wiped the front of her car. The stranger asked the guy in fear, "What is he doing?" He had used a piece of paper to badly scratch the front of the car. Gao looked at his hands in fear and realized that he was holding sandpaper there. The stranger became very angry. The protagonist began to ask her not to act impulsively. The girl clenched her fist as hard as she could. The guy explained to her that the sandpaper was to blame. The angry driver attacked him. The car pulled up to the gates of the Bai Corporation. The security guard at the entrance raised the barrier. The girl got out of the car and held documents in her hands. The security guard greeted her. The driver told the workers with a smile that they could call her manager Bai. The workers were very happy. The guy said admiringly that the president's daughter was very beautiful. The company employees couldn't figure out who could have scratched the girl's car. The manager prepared to sit down at her desk. An employee approached and said she needed her signature on the contract. The manager began sorting through the documents. She saw that Gao Fu Shuai, whom she already knew, had arrived for the interview. Bai beat up the guy. Afterwards, he told her he had an important meeting today. He couldn't be late. He promised to pay off the debt in full. The girl looked at the documents with displeasure and thought that even the guy's name was shameless. Bai glanced angrily at the guy's photo. She figured he'd be rejected right away at the interview. She mentally cursed Gao. The protagonist suddenly sneezed. He was sitting and waiting for a job interview. Gao thought the girl might have just remembered him. At that moment, someone called him from the side. The workers laughed merrily when they heard the main character's name. Gao sat there, upset. The main character started shouting to the secretary from his place that he was nearby. Gao prepared to open the door to his office. He happily thought that the legendary businessman Bai Zhao was sitting there. The guy smiled and thought that he was now taking the first step towards getting closer to his idol. 30 seconds later, the manager told the guy he would only cause problems. The bespectacled worker told the protagonist he'd never even heard of his college. Gao jumped up abruptly and demanded that the manager take his interview seriously. The protagonist headed for the exit. He extended his hand and said in a menacing voice that the Bai Corporation would soon go bankrupt. A man entered the office from the side. He asked the young man with displeasure what would happen to his corporation. The employees greeted the president with surprise. Gao was very scared and surprised. He did not expect to meet President Bai at such a moment. The protagonist looked closely and noticed that a girl he already knew had appeared behind the president. He greeted her in a frightened voice. Gao realized with displeasure that he was facing the driver of the Porsche. He didn't understand what she was doing there. Bai called out to her father in an angry voice. The man glanced at the protagonist with displeasure. Gao realized with alarm that the girl had recognized him. He decided that he had already failed the interview. The main character realized with fright that the company director was the girl's father, and he had offended her. The president looked at the guy and asked if he had come for the interview. Gao fearfully told the man that he had failed and wanted to leave. The president reminded the guy that he had arrived just a minute ago. The manager, alarmed, told the guy that the interview had just begun. He asked Xiao's secretary to bring the candidate some tea. Gao happily noticed that the manager's expression changed very quickly. He decided that he had a chance to pass the interview. Xiao brought the guy tea on a tray with a smile. Gao decided to use the situation to his advantage. The president told the workers that he would stay with them and see that they maintained a good work ethic. The manager said with excitement that they would continue the interview. Gao looked at him in surprise. The manager told the guy with a smile that he had many talents. He held his documents in his hands. The employee decided the protagonist had connections to the president's daughter. Gao explained that he graduated from a regular college and wasn't a top-tier specialist. Gao glanced at the manager and decided that he could now use this situation to get an interview. The worker at the desk continued to compliment the protagonist. He said that this was exactly the type of person their corporation was looking for. The boy thanked the man for the praise. He reminded him that he had a regular education. The manager told the main character with a smile that they were hiring him for the Bai Corporation. The main character was very surprised. He didn't expect to be hired by the corporation so quickly. Gao thought happily that he had come for an interview. Now the distance between him and his idol had shortened. Bai asked the manager with displeasure how he had so quickly determined that the guy might be a good fit for them. They hadn't even found out any information about the candidate. The main character turned around in fear and looked at the girl and her father. The manager asked the girl, alarmed, if Gao wasn't her friend. The woman replied that she had just met him that day. Bai explained in a disgruntled voice that she would not be friends with the man who scratched her car. The manager told the protagonist in a frightened voice to find another corporation for himself. Bai looked angrily at the guy. She wondered how he would now pay for the repairs to her car. Xiao headed for the door and said he would leave right away. At that moment, someone from behind called out to the surprised protagonist. Gao was frightened and stopped. He immediately realized who had just called him. The director stood near the table. He shouted to the guy near the door to wait. Gao turned around in fear and looked at President Bai. He didn't understand what was happening. The man held the documents in his hands and asked the guy if this was his resume. Gao happily confirmed that it was his resume. The man asked the guy, could it really be he who scratched the car of his daughter, Xiao Zhui? The guy was really scared. The president told him that he had given the car to the girl for her birthday. The president explained to the protagonist with a smile that he would have to pay a lot for the car repairs. Gao thought to himself with fear that he would work hard and long to pay off the debt. The president told the protagonist that he would be an intern at his company. He would pay off the debt from his salary. The man told the guy that he could go to work starting next Monday. The manager and the girl were very surprised. The main character was very surprised when he heard that he was offered a job as an intern. The president sternly told the manager of the van to collect the rest of his salary from the finance department. The president told his frightened subordinate that he didn't need people like him. The president turned around and told the guy that he would be given specific details about the job. Gao replied to the man that he really wanted to work there. The protagonist bowed to the man to thank him for hiring him. Gao shouted to the president with a smile and promised to work hard. The main character happily ran to the exit. He passed the interview. Zhu looked at the guy with displeasure. She was very disappointed that he got the job. The president held the documents in his hands. His daughter told him that the boy's specialty was not suitable for the position. Zhu asked her father with displeasure, why did he hire the guy? The president turned around and asked his daughter if she remembered the crisis in the company's information systems 3 years ago. The father reminded his surprised daughter that last time a mysterious guy had helped them. Shuai was very surprised when she heard about the mysterious guy. Gao was walking down the street at that time. The main character walked into a restaurant and ordered a glass of beer from the waiter. The guy suddenly grabbed the mug of beer and immediately drained it to the bottom. Zhao held a glass in his hands. He joyfully shouted that he was a hero with a capital H. The guy noticed with surprise that he was sitting at the table alone. He realized that he had arrived an hour early. Gao walked up to the wall and saw an advert. It needed a private tutor, paid by the hour. Gao was very surprised that the high school needed a tutor for $400 an hour. The protagonist called the ad. He happily thought that if he found a job, he would be able to pay off his debt for the girl's repairs more quickly. Gao asked the guy on the phone about information for a private tutor. A girl appeared at the side of the table. Gao happily informed the boy that he could easily handle the problematic student. The protagonist announced his last name over the phone. At that moment, a stranger with blue hair approached him from the side. The guy on the phone was yelling at the guy that they needed to agree on a place and time to meet. Gao looked at the girl in surprise and didn't answer the phone. The stranger looked at the guy with interest. Meanwhile, the protagonist's phone was still on, and the guy couldn't wait for a response. The girl reminded the protagonist with interest about his phone. Gao held the device in his hands, frightened. The main character told the guy that he had some urgent matters to attend to, and they needed to be resolved. A stranger asked a guy if he was a high school student. The protagonist smiled at the girl and said he was a final-year physics student. He invited her to sit down. The stranger sat down at the table. She said her name was Lin Lulu and that she was a first-year student. The protagonist explained to his interlocutor that his name sounded a little strange, but she could ignore it. He offered her a can of drink. Lulu slyly turned to the side and told the guy that the rest of the guests would be arriving now. The girl happily told the main character that she didn't even expect that there was someone with a name like his. Gao opened a can of drink. He told the girl that he would disappoint her. He personally has nothing to do with his name. Lulu explained to her boyfriend that he is a good and sympathetic person. At this time, the man brought 2 women with him. They all looked at the main character. Gao jumped to his feet near the table. He thought he needed to get out of here quickly. Lulu also became very nervous. She took a frightened swallow and approached the guy. The girl, in a frightened voice, suggested to the protagonist that she sit next to him. Gao agreed with her proposal. The student explained to the guy in a frightened voice that she was a little afraid of strangers. A man ran up from the side and said in a joyful voice that their boss Gao had come here very early. The man looked at the girl in surprise and reminded her that she had not said that she would come. The guest slyly tapped the protagonist on the side and said that a beauty from the business department had come to meet him. Gao swung his hand and told his friend Liu Tao that he had hinted to him that he was not a man. At this moment, more guests ran in from the side. They were all looking for the main character. Liu hugged the guy and shouted to the guests that he was right there. The man touched the protagonist's face with his hand and said that this was a real Gao. The protagonist smiled shyly at the guests and explained to them that his name was Gao Shuai. 2 female students ran up behind a man lying on the floor and started beating him. 2 girls were beating a man. Liu shouted in fear to the main character and the girl to save him. One of the boys couldn't believe he saw Lin Lulu in front of him. Another student was surprised because the girl was sitting next to the main character. A student ran up from the side. She loudly greeted the surprised Lulu. A girl with a green bow ran up to the frightened Lulu and grabbed her hand. Lulu turned around and greeted her friend Nini with a smile. A cheerful student with a green bow informed the guests that she was Lulu's roommate. The main character was delighted. He smiled at the girl and greeted her. The girl slyly asked the guy if he liked Lulu. Gao responded fearfully that he had just met the student. Gao glanced to the side. He noticed that Lulu was sitting at a table with students standing next to her. Ni slyly turned around and told the protagonist that she wanted to help him get Lulu, but she wanted something in return. The student replied to the guy that when she came up with something, she would tell him right away. She explained to her new acquaintance with a smile that he would owe her a small favor. For example, he could treat her to dinner. Liu approached the girl from the side with a glass of beer. He offered her a try. Gao snatched the glass from the man's hands. He said he wanted to get the girl drunk. Liu took the glass in his hands and said with a smile to the guy that he himself would drink 3 mugs at once. The students jumped to their feet joyfully and prepared to clink their glasses to drink. Half an hour later, everyone at the party was drunk. There was a pile of dishes on the table. The students supported each other and headed for the exit. Gao waved his hand at them and reminded them to be careful on the way back. The main character was sitting at a table with a pile of dirty dishes. He felt like he had a headache. Gao grabbed the door and prepared to go out. He turned and looked into the room. The guy noticed a blue-haired student sleeping on the couch. Gao couldn't understand what the girl was doing in this place. Lulu woke up and rubbed her eyes. Lulu complained to the guy in a dissatisfied voice that she felt a little dizzy. Gao's phone rang. The guy texted the protagonist not to do anything inappropriate with Lulu. The main character turned around in surprise and looked at the girl. She was sitting on the sofa. The student felt weak. She closed her eyes and began to fall. Gao quickly and fearfully ran up to the girl and grabbed her with his hands so that she wouldn't fall. The student explained to the guy in a weak voice that she was feeling dizzy. She couldn't even stand up straight. Lulu asked the surprised guy to take her to the dorm. The main character was delighted. He smiled at the girl and confirmed that he would help her. The students around were surprised. They realized that the main character was walking next to Lin Lulu. Gao glanced away. He realized with displeasure that people around him were looking at them and would draw false conclusions. Gao silently turned around and looked to the side at the girl. She was walking next to him. The protagonist decided it was time for him to act. He extended his hand to hug the student. Gao was walking along the evening street and supporting his girlfriend with his hand. Suddenly, she called him. Lulu told the protagonist in a weakening voice that she was having a hard time breathing. The guy was very scared. He removed his hand from the girl and asked her for forgiveness. The main character looked to the side and noticed that the girl had laid her head on his shoulder. Gao decided to himself that he shouldn't have let the girl go. She was still walking with her eyes closed. The main character shouted to his companion to wake up. Lulu opened her eyes. The protagonist pointed forward with his hand. He told the girl that they had already arrived and that the women's dormitory was in front of them. Lulu looked to the side and in a joyful voice confirmed to the guy that he was right. Gao warned his girlfriend to be careful when climbing the stairs. He held her hand. Lulu looked slyly at her friend and asked, "Will he really not go further with her?" Gao looked at the girl with great fear and excitement. He wanted to go with her. The guy sadly explained to his girlfriend that he would be thrown out into the street at the girl's dorm. He had tried this before but failed. After a short pause, Lulu asked the protagonist to give her his phone number. She promised to text him when she got to her room. Gao waved to the girl in front of the gate. He told her that she could write down his number. The guy looked closely at his phone. He heard that he had received a message. Lulu texted her friend. She thanked him for everything and said she had made it to her room. Gao was very pleased because he already had his girlfriend's phone number. Lulu sighed excitedly. She looked at the guy and wanted to tell him something. Gao looked sternly at the girl and said that there was no need to say anything more. Gao told his girlfriend that he already understood everything. He pressed her to himself with his arms. The guy hugged the girl and wanted to kiss her. At that moment, someone called him from the side. The frightened student stretched out his hands to the side and tried to fight off the main character. The guy swung his arm and hit the protagonist in the face with all his might to wake him up. Gao opened his eyes. He was displeased. "Ask your friend why he was so angry this morning." The student told his friend in a frightened voice that he had screamed to defend himself. Gao yawned deeply and asked his friend, "Why did you even wake him up here on Saturday?" The main character suddenly jumped up. He remembered that he had an interview for a tutor today. Gao took off his suit and prepared to leave. He told his friend with displeasure that he should have woken him up earlier. Gao approached the bus to get on. Several more passengers approached behind him. The guy looked out the window and shouted excitedly that he was going to the money. The main character arrived at a huge palace. He cried out in admiration that this place was so huge. Gao was surprised when he saw a luxurious mansion in front of him. At that moment, a butler came out to him. A butler named Lu asked the main character if he had come for the interview. The man told the guest to follow him. They approached the huge doors. Gao and the butler went inside the building. It had a rich interior and there were already other people there. The owner thanked everyone for coming to the interview. He explained that famous professors couldn't handle his daughter. The man told the guests that he was willing to pay a lot of money to coach the girl for the interview. Each of the applicants would receive a blank sheet of paper. The main character looked to the side and noticed how the servant handed him a blank sheet of paper. Gao looked at the sheet of paper in surprise. Each contestant had 20 minutes to make their piece of paper attractive so that the girl would pick it up from the floor. The artist decided to draw something beautiful on paper. Gao remembered that he himself couldn't draw. Gao glanced to the side and noticed a schoolgirl nearby trying to fold a piece of paper. He thought that anyone could do origami. The main character didn't know what to do. He held a piece of paper in his hands and looked at it carefully. The host told the guests that their time was up. He demanded that they give all their work to the maids. A cheerful maid entered the room. All the guests put their papers in her hands. Gao threw a crumpled piece of paper into the maid's hands. The man turned to his daughter, Xing Yu, and asked her to leave. The son angrily shouted at her father not to try to hire more tutors. The man replied that this would be the last time. The guests stood and listened to the conversation in surprise. The girl came up and looked out of the room into the hall with great distrust. Xin was dressed beautifully and richly. She looked at the guests in the hall with distrust. Gao glanced at the girl and saw that she was very beautiful even at a young age. The man turned to the butler and demanded that the servant scatter the paper. Lu threw a bunch of papers up and they scattered in all directions around the room. The girl was unhappy because papers were scattered all over the room. Xin turned her head to the side in displeasure and closed her eyes. She didn't want to pick up the papers. One of the guests said in a dissatisfied voice that he would rather go home and do something useful. One of the girls said angrily that that was enough for her. Shin looked at the guest with displeasure. The guest told the girl that if she was rich, she would not look down on other people. After this, the candidate for the tutor position turned around and headed for the exit. The other guests looked at her in amazement. Sin glanced away with great displeasure. She decided to go over and take the piece of paper. The girl squatted down and picked up the piece of paper from the floor. She unfolded it and was very surprised. The owner and the butler were very surprised. One of the guests shouted in surprise that the son had picked up a piece of paper. The girl was very unpleasantly surprised. She looked at the piece of paper and was dissatisfied. The little mistress turned around and very angrily called the guy shameless. Sin swung and threw the paper aside. The owner opened the sheet and looked at it carefully. He said that someone had come up with such a trick. Tao said joyfully that it was all his idea. He reminded the man that the girl was supposed to lift the half swing. The guy looked at the man with a smile and reminded him that his daughter had picked up his piece of paper from the floor. The owner was unhappy. He shouted at the guy that he had acted very meanly and that they did not agree with it. The man fell silent. He looked at the main character with a displeased look. The host showed a piece of paper in front of the guests and explained that Xing Yu had risen to the floor and picked up a piece of paper with money attached to it. The man read that the guy Gao Fu Shuai signed the piece of paper. The guests around were very surprised when they realized that the guy's name was Gao Fu Shuai. The man told the protagonist that his method was very specific, but his daughter still picked up the piece of paper. Sin was very excited. She told father that she wanted to know which of the guests was stupid enough to attach money to a piece of paper. The girl turned her back in displeasure. She didn't understand who Gao Fu Shuai was next to her. The father stroked his daughter's head with his hand and said that all this attracted her attention. After this, the owner turned sharply to the rest of the surprised guests. The man said that he had prepared a small souvenir gift for each of the guests. Liu handed the protagonist a small box. The protagonist joyfully held the package in his hands. He thought he had received a Parker Gold pen from its owner. The man turned around and told the boy that he had to pass a real test. Even if Gao failed, he would still be grateful to him. The man extended his hand to the protagonist and said that his name was Shijan Liu. The protagonist turned to the man in surprise after hearing his name. Gao immediately remembered the director of the Bai Company and the owner of the Shujiang Liu estate. Gao bowed to the owner and asked with excitement whether he was the president of Liu Corporation. She happily told the guy that someone who had heard about him had already appeared here. Shin turned away in displeasure. The girl turned around and said in a dissatisfied voice that the guy couldn't even shake hands properly. Cao said after the young mistress that he was very worried. The man came up and put his hand on the guy's shoulder. Gao thought to himself that the girl couldn't make comments to him. She said to the guy in a sly voice that they would now begin the second round. The girl stood near the door and looked at the man and the guy with great displeasure. She told the protagonist that he must stay in Jing Yu's room for 40 minutes. The man told the boy that he had to force the girl to accept him as a tutor. This would count as passing the test. Shin angrily slammed the door and demanded that the butler escort the guests out. Gao stood very sad. He realized that it would be difficult for him to convince the girl. The man patted the boy on the shoulder and wished him luck. Gao looked ahead thoughtfully. He didn't know how he could please the girl. The main character suddenly walked into the girl's room and greeted her cheerfully. Xing angrily told the guy that he should have knocked before entering her room. Gao timidly apologized for the intrusion. The protagonist saw a girl sitting near a table and reading a book. There were large toys around her. Gao approached the girl and said with a smile that he wanted to sit down next to her. Sin took a piece of cookie in her hand and bit into it. She told the guy that he was not a little child and shouldn't ask her permission for everything. Gao was very angry. He looked at the girl with displeasure after her words. The guy started to calm himself down. He didn't need to be angry, he needed to smile. The main character asked the girl her name in the friendliest voice possible. The little mistress completely ignored the guy. She was reading a book. Gao became very angry. He realized that the girl belonged to the children of the new generation. Sin took a sip of tea from her cup. She told the guy to leave. The exit was behind him. Gao thought to himself that a special situation requires special measures. He sat down on the floor next to the girl. Sin turned to the guy with displeasure. She noticed that he had grabbed a plate of sweets from the table. Gao began to eat the food from the plate with great appetite in front of the disgruntled hostess. He explained that he would fill his stomach before leaving. The protagonist reached out and snatched the magazine from the girl. She was very unhappy. Sin screamed in displeasure. The protagonist said with surprise that the girl was reading a Korean magazine. Gao grabbed another box of sweets. He said he wanted to try them. Sin was very angry. She looked at the guy with displeasure and said that Dieter Müller personally prepared the cookies. She demanded that the guy stop right now. The guy opened the box of sweets. He said cheerfully that the name Confectioner Miller sounded incredible to him. The main character told the girl that if she behaved indecently, then he himself would not restrain himself. Gao grabbed the cookie with his hands. A disgruntled girl stood next to him. Sin sat down on the floor next to the guy and grabbed his clothes with her hands. He looked at her in surprise. The little mistress sat and looked at the boy with displeasure. She remained silent. After a short pause, the girl threatened the guy that her father would teach him a lesson later. Gao explained to the girl that he would ask her questions. She would have to answer. For correct answers, she would take a cookie. For incorrect answers, he would eat the cookie himself. Zhao happily grabbed the treat from the box and gobbled it up. He wished himself bon appetit. Sin reached for the box of cookies. She angrily demanded that the guy return the treat to her. Gao swung his arm and hit the girl with all his strength so that she wouldn't take the cookie from him. Sin got angry. She told the guy with displeasure that even her father never beat her. Gao quickly thought to himself that he should continue to be strict with the girl. He threatened to beat the crap out of Xing. Gao took a cookie from the box and asked the girl how old she was. The guy continued asking the girl questions. She looked at him silently and said nothing. Gao looked slyly at the girl and promised that for the next correct answer, he would give her 3 cookies. He demanded that his interlocutor say his name. Xing very irritably told the main character his name, Gao Fu Shuai. Xing swung her arm and grabbed the food from the protagonist's hand with a sharp movement, immediately starting to eat it. Gao slyly told the girl not to eat all the cookies at once. The protagonist looked slyly at the girl and asked her to name the first stanza from the tale of the Peach Blossom Fountain. The son asked the guy with displeasure, "What is this fairy tale about the Peach Blossom Fountain?" Gao explained to his interlocutor in a disgruntled voice that this fairy tale is read in middle school. She should know at least the first stanza. Sin told the guy in a satisfied voice that it was very unfair that he was asking questions. The girl grabbed the frightened protagonist by his clothes and shouted that now she would ask him questions herself. Sin started eating cookies from the box. She angrily asked the guy when her birthday was and what her favorite animal was. The main character pointed forward with his hand and angrily asked the girl, "What is her name?" Sin answered all of the protagonist's questions in detail. She even answered the guy's question about the capital of Denmark correctly. Gao grabbed the box of treats from the girl's hands. He told her that she couldn't answer the wrong question correctly. At that moment, someone knocked on the door and demanded that Xing open the door quickly. Gao glanced at his watch and realized that his time was up. Gao walked up to the door and grabbed the handle. He told the girl that he found it interesting to talk to her. Suddenly, the door opened. The man excitedly told the guy to stop and not leave. Xing complained to father with displeasure that the boy had bullied her. She wanted Gao to stay in the room until she took revenge. The protagonist turned around in surprise and asked the girl, "Does he really need to stay?" She nodded affirmatively in response. Shai said with a smile that his daughter asked teacher Gao to stay. He never expected such a day to come. The protagonist was glad to be asked to stay. He thought that if he was called a Gao teacher, it meant he had passed. Shai looked at the protagonist with a smile and invited him to stay a little longer to have a snack. Gao looked at the man and explained that he had to go to another job in the afternoon. The owner, smiling, told the butler to escort the guests to the exit. Liu gestured to the guy to leave. The protagonist apologized for disturbing him. Suddenly, the girl called the main character. He stopped near the exit. Sin swung her arm and threw a small pink bag into the guy's hands as a farewell. The girl looked out of the door and told the main character that she gave him a bag. Gao extended his hand with great excitement and thanked the girl. The little mistress turned around with displeasure and headed to her room. The main character was riding in the back seat of an expensive car on the road. Gao held the bag in his hands. He asked the driver, "Where can I buy the same cookies?" "I'll explain to the guy that the delicacy was made by a famous Swiss pastry chef named Dieter Müller. The cookies are a limited edition. You can't buy them in regular stores." Liu explained to the surprised protagonist that each cookie cost $450. An ordinary student would not be able to afford them. The main character began to fearfully count to himself how much money he had just eaten while visiting the girl. Gao got out of the car. He thanked the servant and wished him a safe return journey. Gao walked along the road with a bag in his hands. He remembered that he hadn't yet paid for the car repairs for Director Bai's daughter. Suddenly, the protagonist heard the sound of a car right in front of him. A red car stopped in front of him. Gao asked the girl with displeasure, "What does she want from him?" He shouted that he was now at 0. Bai, from the driver's seat, told the guy to shut up and get into her car. The frightened protagonist asked the girl where she wanted to take him. Bai looked at the guy with great displeasure. She felt uncomfortable with his words. The driver from the car told the guy with displeasure that she just wanted to take him to the company. The girl turned the car around and sped off. She shouted to the protagonist that he could leave in the minibus. Gao looked at the girl with displeasure and stuck his tongue out at her. He shouted that she was an idiot. Bai suddenly stopped the car abruptly and prepared to turn around. The main character was surprised to see the red car turn around in front of him. Gao was standing on the road when a car drove up to him and braked sharply. Bai stopped abruptly in front of the guy and angrily demanded that he get into the car. The main character got scared. He anxiously asked the girl, why should he sit next to her? The driver explained to the main character that her father told her to bring him. Gao smiled and told the girl that, as per the director's instructions, he would listen to her and go with her. The girl told the guy angrily that he just wanted a free ride. At that moment, the car stopped near the sidewalk. The protagonist entered the company building. The secretary told the guy to sign a document. After that, the guest had to report everything to the creative department manager. The protagonist walked into the HR department. He remembered that he still had some cookies from the girl. Gao stood near the wall. He thought with displeasure that the girl Bai had simply dropped him off near the main entrance and left. The protagonist recalled the driver's words. She sternly demanded that he no longer speak so casually to her in company. The guy was walking down the corridor. He approached the door and knocked on it. Gao said loudly that he had come with a report. Inside the office, a woman was sitting at a desk. She demanded that the employee go and redo the report. Gao walked into the office and looked at the blonde-haired worker in surprise. Gao said with a smile that he came with a report. He asked where the manager was. The girl told the manager that she was in front of him. The employee repeated to the guy once again that it was her. The main character was angry. He still couldn't figure out where the manager was in front of him. Bai looked happily at the guy and said that in their company, he should start from the very bottom. The manager angrily told the protagonist that he would be responsible for cleaning the entire department. Gao pointed at the girl in surprise. He couldn't believe she was sending him to work as a cleaner. The girl looked angrily at the guy and laughed very displeasedly. Gao felt discriminated against. He imagined having to work as a cleaner. The main character asked the girl with displeasure, did everyone in the company really start out as a cleaner? Bai smiled slyly at the guy in response and explained that all of this was certainly not true. The girl explained to the protagonist that he needed to be taught first, so he would start from the very bottom. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. A guy with flowers came in and greeted Shui. Bai told the disgruntled protagonist that he could leave and get back to work. They needed to discuss something with Li's manager. Gao said goodbye to manager Bai in a broken and slurred voice. When the main character was leaving, he exchanged an angry glance with manager Li. Gao closed the door behind him. Li asked the girl who had just been in her office. The protagonist stood outside the manager's room. He told himself that he needed to concentrate. Gao entered the cleaning room. He put on a white cap and took a broom in his hand. The woman from behind asked the main character if the manager had sent him here. The woman told the guy with a smile that her name was Van and that she was responsible for this place. The main character replied to the worker that she could call him Baby Zhao. Wang told the new employee with a smile that her granddaughter was also studying at Tsinghua University. The woman told the protagonist with a smile that manager Bai would definitely promote him in a couple of days. Gao smiled and explained to his interlocutor that he would hope for this. Van picked up the broom. She told the guy that it was his first day and she would be cleaning the department. Gao told the woman with excitement that young people should work more. The guy was holding cleaning tools and a bucket in his hands. He told the woman that she could leave everything to him. The main character entered the office with the workers. He put the bucket on the floor and began to wash everything around. Gao waved his hand to the workers and greeted them. He wished them a good day. Suddenly, someone from the side told the surprised protagonist that he was slacking off on his first day. The manager told the guy in a dissatisfied voice that he either didn't want to work anymore or that he wasn't satisfied with the contract with the company. The office workers were very surprised and scared. They looked at the manager in silence. Li looked at the protagonist with a dissatisfied and angry gaze. Gao looked back at him silently. Gao looked ahead thoughtfully. He didn't understand what manager Li wanted from him. The main character looked at the manager with displeasure. Li stood in front of the guy and studied him angrily with his eyes. After a short pause, the manager told the protagonist that he could leave if he didn't want to work. Gao looked at the manager and said in a dissatisfied voice that he was distracting him from his work. Li got really angry. He asked the guy what he had just said. The main character, holding a mop in his hands, angrily replied to the manager that he could leave. Li looked angrily at the protagonist and asked, "What department is he from?" He demanded that the guy call his boss. Gao looked sternly at the manager and told him to call his mother. Gao started waving a mop in all directions to drive the manager out of the room. Lee became very angry. Lee grabbed the phone and called security. He demanded that the main character be thrown out of here. Gao looked angrily at the manager and asked again what he said. He slammed the mop on the floor with all his might. The office workers were very scared and surprised. They looked at the cleaner in amazement. The protagonist held out a mop. He told the manager in an angry voice that he couldn't just throw him out. Gao explained to Lee in an angry voice that this was his territory and demanded that the manager get out of there. Security guards ran into the room. One of them asked the manager in fear if everything was okay. Lee turned around and ran away in fear. He shouted at the main character that he would fire him anyway. Gao sighed with relief. At this time, other surprised employees stood behind him. Gao stood silently with a mop in his hands. At that moment, a guy approached him from behind. A cheerful worker from behind put his arm around the main character's neck. The employee angrily told the main character that he was very cool. He grabbed him from behind with his hand. At that moment, women's footsteps were heard in the corridor. Bai looked into the room and saw that everyone was congratulating the main character. The office workers all threw up their Gao in unison. They were glad he had driven away the problematic manager. The office staff were frightened when they saw a girl come in. They threw the guy on the floor and dispersed. Bai approached the frightened protagonist and sternly demanded that he get up and follow her. The manager yelled at the protagonist to go to his office immediately. The security guard cheerfully told the guy not to worry and that everything would be fine. Gao approached the girl from behind in the office and asked what the problems were. Bai turned to the main character and asked in a displeased voice why he spoke like that to his superior. Gao explained that the manager was the one who started the conflict. He even wanted to give him a good beating. Bai explained to the protagonist that he was an ordinary worker at the company and that respect for elders was valued above all else. Gao explained to his interlocutor in an excited voice that management would not be able to do anything without ordinary workers. Bai asked the guy in fear why he was talking to her like that. The protagonist told the girl at the entrance that he came here to work. He didn't want to watch the couple boasting about their love. Bai looked at the guy with displeasure and asked who he called a couple. Gao explained to his interlocutor that he didn't care how she felt. He promised to pay her little by little for the repairs. The main character near the exit told the girl not to cause him any more problems. Gao left the room and slammed the door behind him. Bai turned away, displeased and thoughtful. Gao recalled that he too had found it unpleasant to listen to the manager. He decided that he would only do what he had to do. One of the employees placed his hand on the protagonist's shoulder. He said he was doing well. Gao looked at Jun in surprise. The main character asked the guy if he worked here as a manager in this company. Jun thoughtfully explained to the guy that Lee held an even higher position than Manager Bai. Perhaps Lee had even fallen in love with Manager Bai. Gao said to the guy with excitement, as if he couldn't fire him without a reason. Suddenly, a man in glasses appeared from the side. He told the guy that he wouldn't think so. Jun pointed his hand to the side at the man and said that it was Mr. Tu Gao. The man said excitedly that Manager Lee's father was one of the board members. The protagonist was scared. He realized that Manager Lee could put pressure on Manager Bai through his father. Zhong explained to the protagonist that people in this society are very vengeful and angry. Sometimes it's best to keep your emotions contained. He looked happily at the frightened hero. He said that the boy had gotten rid of an annoying splinter today. One of the workers grabbed the main character from behind and said they should give him a drink for this. Zhong cheerfully shouted that the drinks would be on him. The next day, the protagonist woke up in his room. He sat up in bed and said in a disgruntled voice that he drank a lot yesterday and had a splitting headache. Gao recalled yesterday's fun drinking party. He thought to himself that meeting his colleagues had been simply wonderful. The student told the protagonist in surprise that he could see his back. Gao turned around and said in a joyful voice to his friend that he had charmed someone and that they couldn't stop taking pictures of him. Gao ran up to the laptop and pushed his friend aside. He was interested in looking at his photo. Someone posted a video online. In it, an ordinary cleaner chased away the manager with a mop. Gao was very surprised when he saw the video. The main character began waving his arms in all directions in fear. He told his friend that it wasn't him in the video. The student sternly told his friend that the back in the video looked exactly like his. He demanded that Gao tell him in detail everything that happened. Gao ran to the exit at full speed. He shouted to his friend that he urgently needed to go to his internship. The main character came to work. He greeted Aunt Van. The woman told the guy with a smile that he had come early today. Gao explained to the cleaning lady with a smile that he had no classes today and had come early. Van asked the guy if he had really had a fight with the manager yesterday. The main character smiled at the woman and confirmed that it could be said that way. Van smiled and said in a dissatisfied voice to the protagonist that young people should keep everything to themselves. The cleaning lady told the guy that if the manager caused him any more problems, he should just admit his mistakes and apologize. Van turned around and told the guy that she would show him where he would be cleaning today. The protagonist glanced to the side and noticed the girl. She gestured for him to be quiet. Bai gestured for the guy to come to her. She wanted to tell him something. Bai slyly showed the surprised guy that she had urgent business for him. Gao looked at the woman and realized that he had nowhere to go and would have to go with her. The main character, standing near the entrance, said in a sly voice to the woman that he needed to go up the mountain. Van told the guy that he could go. Gao ran into the office and asked the girl with displeasure, "What does she want?" Bai looked angrily at the guy and informed him that Manager Li was already in the office. The girl told the protagonist in a dissatisfied voice that she would not waste her time solving his problems. Bai handed the surprised guy a small document. She said he had the day off today. He needed to avoid danger. The girl turned around and headed for the exit. She told the surprised guy in a displeased voice that he made her worry every day. Gao grabbed the paper. He decided to himself that he would not run away with his tail between his legs. Bai stopped in surprise. She heard the sound of a piece of paper tearing behind her. Gao thanked the surprised girl for her concern. The manager looked at him silently. The main character took a mop in his hands and told the girl about his problems. Gao headed further down the corridor. He shouted goodbye to the girl that he would solve his problems himself. The protagonist approached the door. He heard the manager through the door saying that there should be a good atmosphere in the team. The guy stood and listened carefully. He said in a displeased voice that no one should spoil the team spirit. Li was sitting at the table next to the security guard. He angrily asked where the cleaner had gone. The workers stood as a whole group and listened attentively and silently to the manager. The manager looked angrily at his subordinates and said that he would fire them all now. The workers were very unhappy. At this time, the main character opened the door. Gao angrily explained to the manager that he was the only one who had to quit now. Li looked at the main character with interest and said that he hid because of fear. The manager angrily pointed his finger at the protagonist and said that he had violated a disciplinary rule. Gao calmly dried the manager and prepared to answer him something. The protagonist sternly told the manager that he had returned to take revenge for the destruction of his reputation. Gao glanced at the frightened guy next to the guard. He said he was afraid he might get beaten up. The main character looked at the manager in surprise and jokingly called him very cool. Li became very angry. He shouted at the security guard to immediately take the protagonist to the security department. The security guard angrily approached the guy and told him to step aside with him. The man extended his hand to the main character and called him little brother. Gao reached forward and grabbed the guard's hand in time. Gao held the man's hand and sternly reminded him that he himself had not shown force. The guard got angry. He felt that the main character had grabbed him and he couldn't escape. Gao angrily twisted the man's arm to the side and said that he was not a harmless calf. The protagonist turned around and prepared to hit the guard in the head with all his might. A girl ran into the office from the side and shouted at everyone to stop. Gao turned around in surprise. Bai ran into the office and angrily shouted at everyone to stop. The guard was very scared after being hit by the main character. The glasses on his face shattered. Gao stood and looked displeasedly at the girl near the entrance. Bai angrily demanded that the workers calm down. Gao extended his hand to the side towards the frightened guard. The main character came close to the manager. Li leaned aside in fear. The main character approached the frightened manager. He asked the guy in a trembling voice what he wanted. Li lay frightened near the wall. He demanded in a trembling voice that the boy not come near him. The main character stood next to the manager and looked at him angrily. He was silent. The main character angrily asked the manager, "Where are they now?" Li answered the guy very frightened, saying that he knew perfectly well why. The protagonist extended his hand to the manager and demanded that he speak. Li looked at the guy with fear and shouted to him that they were in the creative department. The protagonist asked the guy what his job title was. Li replied that he was a sales manager. Gao angrily asked him, "What on earth is he doing here?" Gao asked the manager with displeasure why he had come to the creative department. Li became very angry. He looked at the main character with displeasure. Gao glared at the manager and squeezed his hand with all his might. The main character slammed his hand against the wall with all his might. He turned away in fear. The guy's blow left a big dent in the wall. Gao demanded that the manager get lost quickly. A girl ran into the office. She angrily shouted at the workers to stop. Bai angrily shouted at her subordinates to stop fooling around. Gao turned around and angrily asked the girl, "Who is playing the fool here?" Bai glanced at the protagonist with displeasure and remained silent. She decided not to stop him. Gao looked at the frightened manager and promised that his fist would not miss again. Zhao headed for the exit. The security guard asked the manager in fear if everything was okay. Li ran to the exit at full speed. The security guard rushed after the manager and demanded that he wait for him. Gao stopped. He was frightened, thinking that the manager had run off to complain to his superiors. The main character was frightened and decided that this time he might actually get fired. Gao turned around and explained to the workers that they should pretend nothing had happened. They could continue working. Bai looked at the main character with great excitement and called him by name. Zhang and his colleagues watched the main character leave. He thanked the main character for everything in a very joyful voice. The protagonist walked towards the exit. He said to himself with displeasure that his small wish could not come true. The guy shouted angrily that for some reason everything ends exactly like this. The main character sadly walked out into the corridor. He told himself that everything was very terrible. The protagonist approached the college entrance. He saw a girl holding a book near the gate. The guy looked at his hand in surprise and noticed a deep cut on it. At that moment, someone called him from the side. The student slyly pointed at the guy with her hand and said that she thought he was a real senpai. Gao asked his friend Lulu with great surprise what she was doing here. Lulu asked the surprised guy what happened here. The girl looked at the main character with concern and said that he looked a little pale. The girlfriend put her hand on the guy's head and asked, "Does he really have a fever?" Gao replied to his interlocutor that he didn't think he had a fever. He felt his heart begin to beat rapidly. Lulu, frightened and worried, pointed out to the protagonist that his arm was injured. The girl excitedly told the main character that his hand was bleeding. Gao looked at the girl in surprise and explained that he accidentally hit something. The girl excitedly told the protagonist that she would now give him a bandage. Gao replied that he didn't need anything. Lulu happily shouted to the guy that she found what he needed. She handed him a band-aid. Lulu told the guy that he was very clumsy and reminded him about the wound. The girl looked at the guy suspiciously and said that he received the wound in a fight. Lulu put a bandage on the protagonist's arm. She asked him, "Has he really never fought anyone?" Gao screamed in fear and pain. Lulu looked at the guy and said with suspicion that he really had a fight with someone. Gao explained to his interlocutor as if nothing had happened that he had been at home all night, busy studying, and had accidentally cut his hand on the table. Lulu told the guy with displeasure that he had not convinced her at all with his excuse. The main character told the girl with a smile that he would go to the dorm and sleep. After that, he would quickly recover. The girl looked after the main character and said that let it be as he says. Gao smiled at the girl and made a heart shape with his hands. He promised to treat her to lunch. The girl was delighted. She agreed to the protagonist's proposal. Lulu approached the guy and asked if he would be free tomorrow. The girl invited the protagonist to go shopping with her. Gao thought with excitement that this could be an invitation to a date. The main character asked the girl in fear, "Will they really need to go shopping?" Lulu said that she wanted to go to the movies with Vanya tomorrow, but her friend can't go alone. She already bought the tickets and everything. The girl asked the main character if he could go with her. Gao was very happy. He shouted to the girl with great pleasure that he would go with her. The student told the protagonist in response that it was all wonderful. Lulu waved to the guy and said that they would meet at the same place tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Gao very joyfully shouted to the girl that he was really looking forward to meeting her. At that moment, the phone in the protagonist's pocket rang. He reached for the receiver. Gao picked up the phone and asked with displeasure who was calling him. The girl held the phone in her hands and remained silent. She was waiting for what the guy would say to her. Bai introduced herself to the guy over the phone. The protagonist was scared. He thought the girl called to tell him she was leaving. Bai asked the main character on the phone, "Where is he now?" The interlocutor asked the guy if everything was okay. The protagonist replied that he was fine. He was walking down the road. Gao walked along the path and kicked small stones. He explained to the girl that he did not want to disturb her. Bai reminded the main character not to be late for work on Monday. The main character thought with fear that if he was invited to work on Monday, it meant that he had not been fired. Bai told the protagonist over the phone that the company knew about the situation with the manager. The director would take care of all of this. The girl told the main character that the director held him accountable for his actions. The main character excitedly thanked the manager by phone. The girl on the phone told the main character that she should have stopped the manager earlier. The main character began to excitedly shout to the girl that everything was fine with him. He said goodbye to her. The guy was surprised to think that the girl even apologized to him. The protagonist was delighted to think that he had not been fired. He felt like a winner. Gao was pleased to think that the company's president turned out to be a respected person. The main character happily imagined that tomorrow he would put on a festive suit to meet a girl. Gao walked and joyfully sang various cheerful songs to himself. He felt that life is beautiful. The main character walked down the street in his holiday attire. He was ready for a date with Lulu. The guy looked happily at his phone. He thought that everything was happening as if in his dreams. Suddenly, a girl came up to the guy from the side and called out to the main character. Lulu approached the guy and apologized for being late. Gao noted that the girl was very beautiful. The guy smiled at the student and said that he himself had just arrived. He felt himself smiling involuntarily. Lulu suggested to her friend that they hurry to the cinema. The film was supposed to start soon. The guy happily replied that they were going. The main character happily thought that he would take advantage of the opportunity and kiss the girl. The main character was sitting next to a girl in the cinema in the adjacent seats. Gao looked sideways at his girlfriend. She was staring intently at the screen. The protagonist took a deep breath. He realized that he had to take advantage of this moment. Gao glanced sideways at his girlfriend and realized that he had to grab her hand now. The guy extended his hand towards the girl's hand. He saw that it was completely open. Lulu jerked her hand to the side at the last moment. Gao grabbed her chair. The protagonist turned away in disappointment. He was unhappy that the girl had removed her hand. Gao glanced at his girlfriend and noticed with dismay that she had simply decided to fix her hair. The protagonist thought with displeasure that he had failed just like the hero of a romantic comedy in a manga. The girl adjusted her hair and reached her hand back to the armrest of the chair. Gao was very surprised when he saw that the girl placed her hand on top of his hand on the chair. The girl sat and looked calmly to the side. The protagonist watched her attentively. Gao looked at the girl's hand on his arm with great excitement and agitation. The girlfriend raised her hand on the guy's hand and turned it over sharply. Lulu firmly grasped the surprised protagonist's hand with her fingers. Gao was very happy. He thought to himself that today the goddess of love was patronizing him. After watching the film, the main character and his girlfriend went out into the hallway. He looked at her from the side with interest. Gao walked and held the girl's hand. He didn't know whether he should confess to her. The guy glanced happily to the side and noticed a mother and daughter near the ice cream stand. Gao turned and offered his friend to get ice cream for both of them. Lulu, frightened, told him not to do that. The main character turned to the side and told the girl joyfully that he would return quickly. The seller handed the protagonist a can of drink. The girl turned away. Lulu told her boyfriend on the phone that they would see each other later. The protagonist handed the girl a glass and asked if she had arranged to meet anyone. Lulu replied with a smile that she hadn't arranged to meet anyone. The girlfriend turned to the guy. He looked at her questioningly and worriedly. Lulu looked at her friend and said in a dissatisfied voice that she was a little tired. Lulu took her friend by the arm and suggested that he come back quickly. Gao turned around suspiciously. He noticed that the girl was acting very strangely. At this moment, a stranger in a suit appeared from the side. He called out to the frightened girl. Lulu very abruptly immediately moved her hand away from the main character's hand. The stranger took off his glasses and looked at the girl angrily and attentively. A guy with long red hair asked the girl with interest to introduce him to her friend. Gao thought to himself with surprise that the girl invited a friend to study here. Lulu explained to the guy with displeasure that the guy next to her was not her boyfriend, but just a friend. The main character became very agitated. He looked at his girlfriend with displeasure and fear. The stranger looked at the girl and demanded that she tell the truth. Lulu became very worried. She said in an apologetic voice that everything was not like that at all. The main character decided that the girl was shy and he wanted to help her with this. Gao extended his hand to the stranger and explained that he and the girl were just friends. The guy looked at the main character with interest and great distrust. The stranger put his hand on the main character and explained that the girl was calling only him. Gao turned around with displeasure at the stranger. He didn't understand why his girlfriend had invited them on the same day. The stranger approached the girl and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. Gao looked sideways at his girlfriend and realized that he was her backup option. Lulu and her friend looked good together. The main character decided that he had to leave, even if he didn't want to. Gao told his girlfriend and boyfriend that if they met, he would already have left. The stranger turned around and told the protagonist that they would never see each other again. Gao answered the guy with a smile that they would see each other again sometime. In his mind, he said goodbye to the girl. The stranger suggested that his girlfriend go to a nearby cafe. Lulu picked up the phone. She asked her friend if she could call first. The guy agreed. Lulu picked up the phone and called her friend named Nini. The protagonist approached the entrance to the university dormitory. He was thinking about unrequited love. At this time, some stranger from behind called out to the guy. He stopped. Gao turned around and grabbed the girl who ran up to him by the arms. It was Ni. The student shouted at the guy that she was sorry. She explained that it was all her idea. She excitedly explained to the main character that Lulu and her classmate had liked each other for a very long time. She explained to the protagonist with great excitement that she couldn't bear to watch the relationship between Lulu and her classmate for long. The protagonist figured it out. He told the girl that Lulu asked him out on a date to encourage another guy. She bowed down in fear before the guy and shouted that everything happened because of her. Gao put his hand on the student's shoulder and explained that everything was fine. The main character explained that he was simply used, and he, like a fool, fell for it. Gao stepped aside. He shouted at the girl that it was as if they had never met before. At this time, someone called the main character and suggested they go for a drink. A car was parked nearby, and Bai heard it all. Bai couldn't understand why the main character went out drinking during the day. The protagonist woke up the next morning with a severe hangover. He happily remembered that he had set an alarm so as not to miss his tutoring assignment. Gao thought to himself with displeasure that he was going to work with a broken heart and a hangover. The main character noticed with surprise how the manager of the bay was saying goodbye to some friend on the street. Bai turned around with displeasure and looked at the main character with interest. The manager asked the guy with interest, "Why did he wake up so early after drinking?" Gao was very scared. He asked the girl why she was standing near his college in the morning. The main character shouted angrily at the girl that she was stalking him. Bai laughed to herself with displeasure. She was amused by the guy's behavior. The manager told the guy that she had been to evening classes the previous day and overheard him saying he was going out drinking. Gao asked his interlocutor with surprise about yesterday's classes. The protagonist had an idea. He shouted at the girl that she hadn't even graduated yet. Bai sternly explained to the guy that she was a teacher at the business department. Gao shouted angrily at his interlocutor to maintain her image as a teacher. The main character felt that he was in pain, but there was something more important. Gao asked his interlocutor if she had a minutka. The girl asked him what he wanted. The protagonist opened the door and got into the car. He told the girl to give him a ride to the right address. Bai responded with displeasure that she was not a taxi driver. Bai was driving in the car and talking to his girlfriend. He excitedly proved to her that he was a private tutor and not a cleaner. Bai drove the protagonist to the right address and threw him out of the car. She reminded him not to be late for work. Gao was lying on the ground. He said to himself in a dissatisfied voice that the girl was very crazy. The protagonist stood up. He thought the girl was a good person. She didn't just want to use him. The guy stopped and said to himself that what was important for him now was to earn more money. Gao pointed his hand to the side and said that money would make him happy. The protagonist shouted at the girl to get ready for his hellish lesson. He imagined her being terrified while awaiting his arrival. The butler greeted the protagonist and invited him in. The man informed the girl that Mr. Gao had arrived. The student approached the door and carefully opened it. She looked at the guy with distrust. Sin looked at the main character with satisfaction and said that he could go inside. Zhao noted with a smile to himself that only a couple of days had passed, and the girl had become even more beautiful. Xing discontentedly told the protagonist to quickly sit down somewhere. Gao realized that he was dealing with a very difficult child. The main character took the book in his hands and suggested that the girl start the lesson quickly. Gao looked at the girl in surprise. He realized that she was ready to study. Sin was lying on the bed and looking slyly at the guy. She was holding a book in her hands. Gao explained to his interlocutor with a smile that the lesson had begun. He would be her teacher, and she, his student. Sin glared at the guy and said he came here for the money. She offered him some tasty treats and some tea. Ultimately, the guy would earn money, and she would also benefit. Gao thought about it. He realized that Mr. Liu believed in him and he could not let him down. Sin looked at the protagonist with surprise. He took the book from her hands. The protagonist slyly told the girl that he would give her the book only after the lesson. The student angrily screamed that she didn't want to study. The girl threatened the guy that she would complain to her father and he would be fired. Gao challenged the girl to a bet. If she won, he would leave immediately. Sin looked angrily at the main character and shouted that she agreed to argue with him. Gao looked slyly at the student. The girl thought that all this was some kind of trick. The main character looked slyly at the girl and said that he would now offer her something. Gao explained to the student that she would never be able to do what he wanted. The main character told the girl that she should lean her right body against the wall and raise her right leg. The student laughed very loudly. Gao looked at her in amazement. The girl told the main character with a smile that she could do such a simple thing. Sin placed her leg against the wall. She told the guy with a smile that he could start packing. The main character looked angrily at the girl and said that they would still see who would win. The girl happily told the guy that she could complete his task. Gao smiled slyly at his interlocutor and said that she could begin. Gao took the cup in his hands. He told the girl with a smile that she could try as much as she wanted, but the result would not change. Xing tried to stand near the wall but kept falling. Gao asked her with interest if she had finished. The student fell to the ground and screamed in displeasure that it hurt. Sin looked at the guy with displeasure and shouted at him not to look at her. The student sternly demanded that the boy turn away. Gao looked away. The main character slyly suggested that the girl try to complete the task again. Sin looked at the guy with displeasure and shouted that he had deceived her. Gao spread his arms out to the side. He told the girl that he hadn't promised her that it would be easy to do. Sin turned away angrily and displeasedly. The protagonist decided to explain everything to her. Gao explained to the girl with the drawing the details about the displacement of the center of gravity in a person. The main character stroked the girl on the head and said that lack of knowledge could easily let her down. The protagonist handed the girl a piece of paper with a test on it. He said he had prepared it for her himself. Sin jumped back sharply. She shouted at the protagonist that she hated tests. Gao handed the girl a piece of paper and said that she could easily pass the test. The main character shouted at the girl that she asked for it and shouldn't blame him for being rude. Gao swung his arm and demanded that the frightened girl perform the test. Sin sat down at the table. She told the guy in a displeased voice that all he knew was how to offend. The girl sat in the room and continued to take the test. She shouted that this was all very difficult for her. Sin capriciously waved her hands to the side at the table and shouted that she couldn't take it anymore. The protagonist took the piece of paper in his hands. He told the girl that he would look at her test. The guy looked closely at the piece of paper and became very angry. Gao angrily shouted at the girl that she drew a pig on the piece of paper. He tried very hard when he prepared the test for her. Sin sat and smiled quietly, innocently. She turned her head to the side. The main character grabbed a broom in his hand. He shouted at the girl that it was impossible to be nice to her. Xing asked the guy in fear, "What is he going to do?" Gao swung his broom and shouted at the girl that he was going to be cruel. After the blow, the student fell to the floor. The main character threatened to hit her again if she cried again. Gao angrily demanded that the girl get up and take the test. He thought to himself that he needed to continue like this until the girl changed herself. Sin sat and looked at the guy with resentment. She raised her hand to her face to wipe away the tears. Suddenly, the student told the teacher in a confident voice that she would take the test. Sin was sitting at the table and writing a test. The protagonist stood nearby and watched attentively. Gao looked happily at the student and thought that she took the test seriously. At that moment, the large clock on the wall began to ring. The time for the test was over. The girl handed the main character a piece of paper and said that she had taken the test. The son happily grabbed the piece of paper. He shouted to the girl that he would check everything now. Gao carefully checked the test. He told the girl that it was all difficult, but she managed it. Gao explained to the girl in detail where she had gone wrong in the test. Xing excitedly replied that she had simply forgotten something. The main character looked carefully at the piece of paper and prepared to tell the girl the result. Gao joyfully raised the piece of paper up and shouted to the girl that she had scored 65 points. The student asked with surprise and excitement if she had passed the test. Gao patted the girl on the head and said in a joyful voice that she was able to do it. The protagonist happily thought that the carrot and stick method works on such problematic girls. Sin thought to herself very happily and slyly that she had taken the test. Gao looked at the student attentively. She wanted to tell him something. The student slyly told the protagonist that she now had a chance to take revenge. Gao was very scared and worried when he heard the girl talk about revenge. The protagonist turned around and told the girl that she must have the ability to take revenge. Sin gave a thumbs up and said that it was her first time passing a high school level test. Gao thought to himself that the girl shouldn't be proud of the fact that she passed the test for the first time. He didn't want the student to find out about his low grades. Sin looked at the main character from behind with displeasure and called him a swindler. Gao looked at the student with displeasure. He grabbed the broom and hit her. Sin screamed very loudly in displeasure. She covered her face with her hands. The main character asked the girl if she was happy with him still holding the broom in his hands. Sin looked at the guy with fear and tried to justify herself to him. The little housewife shouted to the guy in fear that she would bring the first aid kit. Sin approached the main character and began to treat the wound on his hand. Sin approached the surprised teacher and asked him for forgiveness. Gao was surprised when he heard the girl just call him teacher. The boy smiled at the student and explained with a smile that he was also wrong. Sin silently thought and looked at the main character. She didn't say anything to him. The girl shouted to her friend that she would now go and put away the first aid kit. She ran to the side. Sin was running and tripped over a slipper at full speed. She fell to the floor. The student fell and dropped the first aid kit. The guy grabbed it in time. Gao grabbed the girl in his arms and asked with surprise if she was okay. Xing opened her eyes and looked at the guy in surprise. Gao looked at her silently. Suddenly the student closed her eyes. The protagonist looked at her with fear. Gao thought to himself with excitement that the girl had given him a signal to begin action. The main character leaned closer to the girl to kiss her. Sin opened her eyes and called out to the surprised teacher in a very frightened voice. Gao grabbed his head with his hand. He remembered that he was just a teacher to the girl. The main character told the girl that classes were over for today. Gao looked at the girl and said that he would adjust the lesson plan for her based on her results. The main character promised the student that next time he would buy her some textbooks. Sin ran up to the guy and grabbed him by the clothes with her hand to stop him. The student glanced at the teacher. She really wanted to go with him to get her textbooks. The main character explained to the girl that he would only be free on Monday next week. She should be at school at that time. Sin explained to the teacher in a thoughtful voice that she had not gone to school for a long time. Sin looked at the guy pleadingly and asked him to take her with him. The main character explained to the student with displeasure that they would go together to the bookstore near the buy company. Sin smiled happily for the main character and said that he was the best. The main character was walking down the street in the evening. He told himself that he was very tired. The guy noticed that there were a lot of people near the building. He realized that the hall was very crowded. Lu appeared from the side. He greeted the main character with a smile. Gao asked his friend with displeasure, "Why are there so many people in the auditorium?" Liu said with a smile to the main character that they could go and look at the annual beauty contest. Gao said with surprise that he was so busy that he didn't pay attention to what was happening in the college. Liu slyly told his friend that Lin Lulu also wanted to participate in the competition. The main character turned around with displeasure and repeated the name Lin Lulu to himself. Liu suggested the guy go into the hall. He said they might not have enough space. The main character waved to his friend and explained that he had some unexpected business to attend to. Liu pulled the frightened protagonist by the clothes. He shouted that there was nothing more important than looking at beautiful girls. Xiao Qiao walked onto the stage in a blue suit. The host shouted, "She's a second-year management student." The audience near the stage was very happy. They shouted words of encouragement to the various participants. Liu stood near the stage with the main character. He told him about the various participants. Liu slyly whispered to his friend that Lulu from the business department would win the competition. The host announced that Lulu, a participant from the Faculty of Business, was coming onto the stage. The audience in the hall was extremely happy. They shouted words of encouragement for the participant. Lulu stood on the stage in a very beautiful white dress. Everyone in the audience was shouting her name. Gao looked at the girl and thought that she was, as always, very beautiful. The main character turned around and walked away. Liu asked him with excitement, "Where was he going?" Liu asked the guy, "Won't he wait for the results?" Gao replied that he just wanted to go for a walk. Gao replied to his friend that he didn't want to go out. At that moment, the host announced the winner's results. The host happily announced that Lin Lulu had won. She congratulated her. The host said that the contestant should tell them about her love. The sad protagonist walked away. Lulu stood near the microphone. She was shy and didn't know what to say. Xiao left the competition. He didn't want to stay any longer. The presenter asked the frightened participant if there was anyone special in her life. Lulu explained to her interlocutor in a calm voice that there was a person she was worried about. Lulu told the surprised audience that she was in the only place where the person she cared about could hear her. The participant bowed and quietly asked the elder for forgiveness. Gao was shocked when he heard such words from his girlfriend. He turned to her in surprise. Liu slyly hit his friend with his hand and explained that the girl apologized to him. Gao looked away. He explained to his friend that there was a misunderstanding and everything had already been resolved. The main character told his friend that he was leaving. Liu was surprised that the guy didn't answer the girl. The main character was walking through the park late in the evening. He kept thinking about the girl. Gao stopped. He thought he was in pain, but he kept pretending as if everything was fine. At this time, someone ran up to the guy from the side and called him in a frightened voice. The main character turned around in surprise and saw that there was a girl named Lulu next to him. Gao reminded his interlocutor with great excitement that the awards ceremony had already ended. The girl looked at the main character and said that she shouldn't have lied to him. Gao stood frightened in front of the girl. He understood that he had to forgive her. Lulu looked at the guy and asked him not to ignore her. The main character looked at his girlfriend and asked her to shut up. Gao told his interlocutor not to tell him anything else. Gao looked at the girl and said that he never avoided her. Lulu asked the guy in a frightened voice if they were still friends. Gao stood and hugged his girlfriend. At that moment, Bai walked past and looked at him with displeasure. Bai pointed her finger to the side and demanded that the guy take his hands off Lulu. The protagonist turned around in surprise. He didn't expect to see Zhui Bai here. The guy suddenly raised his hands up. He shouted at the manager that he didn't do anything. Lulu looked ahead with interest and greeted Teacher Bai. Bai grabbed the guy by the ear with her hand. Lulu screamed in fear to the teacher. that this is all a misunderstanding. Bai told the girl in a confident voice that her teacher was next to her. The frightened protagonist shouted at the manager that she would rip his ear off. Lulu continued to assure the teacher that the boy had not offended her. The protagonist came to work at the company the next day. He remembered that Bai had accused him of misbehaving towards Lulu, so he reported to the security guards in the office and went to bed late. He walked up to the guy and hugged him. He invited him to pop into the restaurant with them. The protagonist waved to the man and said that he was busy today. He could see them next time. The protagonist approached the door of the creative manager's office. He heard someone screaming inside. Gao opened the door slightly. He heard Li pestering the girl very angrily. Bai angrily shouted at the manager not to bother her unnecessarily. Li looked at the girl with displeasure and said that he was her fiancé. The manager angrily explained to his interlocutor that he could visit her unnecessarily. Bai shouted at the manager in an angry voice that she would never agree to the marriage. Li looked slyly at the girl and promised that they would definitely get married anyway. The main character came from the side. He said in an angry voice that he saw the manager. Gao walked into the office with a mop over his shoulder. He reminded the manager of what he had told him earlier. The main character looked angrily at the manager and said that he met him again. Li waved his hand at the main character and said that he had urgent business in the main department. Gao turned around and told the departing manager that he was a coward. Gao turned around and told the girl not to thank him. He simply didn't like the manager and hadn't yet forgotten what Bai had done to him the previous evening. Bai looked angrily at the guy and explained that all this happened because of the way he behaved before. Gao was very unhappy. He sternly asked the girl when he had ever behaved badly. Bai explained to the guy that the company, after observing him, decided to change something in his work. The main character thought that the director might have found out about his situation and decided to fix everything. Gao said in a sly voice that he didn't want to go to the security department. He was absolutely happy with his current job. Bai looked angrily at the main character and said that they had not yet decided where to transfer him. At this moment, the protagonist's phone rang. The manager turned away with displeasure. Gao greeted his student and said that he was already on his way down to her. The son slyly asked the guy on the phone not to keep her waiting for long. At this time, two very angry strangers approached the girl from behind. The bully extended his hand to the student and invited her to have a drink with them. Sin turned around with displeasure and asked the strangers what they wanted from her. The hooligan looked angrily at the girl and said that they wanted to have a drink with her. The schoolgirl brushed off the stranger and demanded that he leave her alone. The disgruntled bully told the girl that she should be grateful to them for inviting her. The stranger attacked the girl and demanded that she stop playing hard to get. Sin was very scared. She screamed and wanted to shield herself from the attacker with her hand. The student swung her leg and kicked the attacker in the groin with all her strength. The hooligan received a very strong blow. He immediately doubled over in pain. One of the hooligans turned around in fear and asked his friend if everything was okay. Sin waved her hand in fear and explained that she had not hit the bully on purpose. The leader got angry. He shouted at the bandits to grab the girl. Sin was very scared. A gang of hooligans was hanging around her. The main character appeared from the side. The leader shouted to his subordinates that they would have fun today. Gao was very scared. He turned around and looked at his student with concern. The protagonist ran up and shielded the girl with his body. He angrily asked the attackers what they were doing to his student. The girl was very happy to see the guy. She happily called him teacher. Gao turned around and very happily promised the student that he would protect her. The leader attacked the guy very angrily and called him a student. Gao swung his leg with all his might and kicked the attacker in the stomach. Gao angrily told the beaten leader to watch his language. The bully looked angrily at the guy. At that moment, the wail of sirens was heard from the side. The bandits turned away with displeasure. One of them said that the police were arriving. The hooligans got scared and started running away along with their leader. Gao turned around in fear. He told his girlfriend that it would be unpleasant if they were taken to the police station. The main character and his girlfriend quickly ran inside the bookstore to hide. Sin told the protagonist with admiration that he knocked out the bully with one blow. Hao explained to the girl that he had learned a few things from his policeman father. The girl explained to the main character that the hooligans themselves came up to her and spoke to her. Gao patted the student on the head. He told her that next time she should just run away from the bullies. Gao and his young student joyfully shouted that they were going to buy some books for themselves now. The main character was standing with his girlfriend. They were choosing books in the store. Gao turned and informed his companion that Lu the butler would be waiting for her at the end of the street. The student went outside and covered herself with a book. She said it was hot today, and the butler could have picked her up right there. Gao pointed to the side and told the girl that they could go through the mall. It was much cooler there. Sin said in an exhausted voice that she felt like she was melting. The protagonist replied to his girlfriend that he would go and buy her something cold. Gao turned around in surprise and noticed some strangers in the alley. He didn't understand who they were. One of the bandits ran up and pointed his finger at the main character for the boss. The leader angrily asked the main character, "Could it really be that he beat up his fighters?" Gao hugged his girlfriend. He asked the bandits what they wanted from him. The boss was very angry. He accused the protagonist of hitting his brother. Gao explained to the unknown bandit that he himself had hit his brother. His student was not involved. The bandit took out a big club. He shouted at the guy that he would cut off his leg, which he had hit his brother with. The bully angrily pointed his finger at the guy and threatened to cut off his leg. Gao realized with fear that he had to think of something now. The leader glared at Gao and demanded that he stop playing the hero. The bandit told the guy in an angry voice that his brother was about to hit him. Gao shouted at the boss not to touch his girlfriend. Gao told the hooligans in a stern voice that my guys could do whatever they wanted with him, but they had to let the student go. Sin grabbed her friend with her arm and shouted at the hooligans about the money. The student shouted at the bandits that she would give them money, if only they would let them go. The leader glared at the girl and asked how much money she had. Was it really only a couple thousand? Shang shouted angrily at the hooligans that she was the daughter of the company's president, Lu. The main character was scared. He reached out to cover the girl's mouth. The leader asked the schoolgirl if she was Shijana Lu's daughter. The protagonist shouted at the bandit, wondering if he misheard. Sin pushed her companion aside with her hand. She shouted at the bandits to leave them alone. The leader smiled evilly at the girl and said that they should treat Miss Lu with respect. The student happily told the boy that her father's name worked very well. The hooligan swung his baton. The leader shouted to the fighters that they needed to take the young miss. The bully swung a huge bat and shouted at the main character to get lost. Gao pushed his girlfriend aside and demanded that she get out of there. The protagonist put his hand forward and blocked the bully's blow. He shouted at the student to run and not look back. Gao stood and held his hands in front of him. He defended himself from the bully's blow. The main character swung his arm with all his might and hit the attacker on the head with his hand. The leader ran up to the guy and angrily asked where he was looking. Gao took a very strong blow to the head and immediately flew to the side. The girl was scared. The guy fell to the ground after a very strong blow. Gao lay motionless on the ground. He called out to the girl in a weakening voice. The main character shouted at his girlfriend to run. She ran down the street and turned around in fear. Gao lay motionless. With a weakening and clouded gaze, he saw the running student in front of him. The main character woke up at night in an abandoned factory in the suburbs. Gao was in a large cage with his girlfriend. He couldn't figure out where they were. Gao started looking for his girlfriend. He turned his head to the side and saw Xing there. The kidnapper approached the captives from the side and angrily said that they had woken up. The boss sternly told his subordinates to untie the protagonist's mouth. The leader tore the bandage off the boy's face. Gao asked him with displeasure, why did they kidnap them? The boss angrily told the boy that he hadn't expected to receive such a gift. He only wanted to avenge his brother. The leader extended his hand to the girl's face. She was very scared. Gao looked at the man with displeasure and shouted at him not to touch the girl. Sin was handcuffed to a pole along with a guy. The leader said the captive was worth 100 million. Gao was very angry when he heard such words from the boss. Next to him was a frightened student. The boss glared at the guy and swung his hand at him. The leader hit the guy on the head with all his might and shouted that he was worthless. Sin was very scared. She moaned in fear and couldn't shout anything. Gao spoke in a calm voice after the blow and told his companion that he was fine. The leader headed for the exit. He shouted to his subordinates to keep an eye on the prisoners. One of the bandits approached the main character and grabbed him by the head. He demanded that he not move. The kidnappers headed for the exit. One of them said that watching the hostages was better than patrolling with the boss. Gao untied his hands from behind. He thought that he had to get his girlfriend and himself out of here as quickly as possible. The bandit told his colleague not to be late. This was an important task for them. The kidnapper turned to the side and said angrily that the knots on the ropes needed to be tightened. At that moment, the phone on the table rang. The girlfriend asked the bandit Amy to buy her a designer handbag. The bandit told his girlfriend on the phone that she could buy whatever she wanted. He had money. Sin was sitting on the floor. The protagonist came up and grabbed her hand to help. Zhao gestured for the girl to be quiet. He wanted to help her free herself. The main character and his girlfriend wanted to run away. They hit their handcuffs on a pole. The protagonist got scared. He realized that the bandit had heard the noise and was about to attack them. The kidnapper got scared. He looked to the side and saw that the captives wanted to escape. An angry bandit swung a knife to stab the main character. The bandit angrily swung his knife at the guy and shouted that he was tired of living. Gao looked at his opponent with complete calm. He carefully stepped back and tripped him. The kidnapper lost his footing and immediately began to fall to the ground. The bandit with the knife fell to the ground. The blow took his breath away. Gao swung his arm and hit the kidnapper on the head from behind with all his might. Gao wasn't holding on to the pole with his hand and was wiping sweat from his head with his hand. An unconscious bandit was lying to the side. The son asked her friend in fear, "Is the kidnapper really dead?" Gao grabbed a knife. He told the girl that their phone had been taken and they needed to get at least some information. Another kidnapper appeared from the side. He asked with displeasure, "What was all that noise?" The bandit got very angry when he saw that the prisoners wanted to escape. He shouted at them that he had only stepped away for 1 minute. Gao rushed forward at the kidnapper with a knife in his hand. The bandit fought back with his blade. The protagonist swung his knee and hit the kidnapper with all his might. The bandit looked angrily at the guy and shouted that he had forced him to do it. The kidnapper jumped up and swung his blade to hit the girl. The frightened main character shouted at the girl to be careful. The bandit swung his knife wide and hit the guy from behind. Sin called out to her wounded teacher in a very frightened voice. The schoolgirl asked the teacher in fear if everything was okay. Gao thought with displeasure that he needed to quickly finish off the bandit. The kidnapper sternly told the protagonist that he must obey him. Gao swung his leg very deftly and quickly and knocked the knife out of the kidnapper's hand. The angry protagonist swung his fist to hit his opponent. Gao hit the attacker in the face with all his might. The bandit flew to the side. The main character looked closely at the bandit and noticed that he was lying unconscious. Gao hugged and picked up his frightened girlfriend. She still called him teacher. The guy told the girl that he was okay. He asked if she still had her phone. Gao asked the girl to open the card on her phone and give the device to him. The guy looked closely at his phone. He told himself that he had to do something. Gao found on the map on his phone a place where they had once been on an excursion with classmates. The main character looked at the map with excitement and realized that there must be an important place there. Gao explained to the girl that they needed to get out of the factory. He asked her to call her father and let him talk to the man. The main character thought to himself in fear that he could die today. Gao thought that he couldn't let anything happen to his girlfriend. The main character was running away from the factory with a girl. He said as he ran that the cut on his hand wasn't that deep. They wouldn't be able to track them down by the bloodstains. Gao and his companion entered the workshop. He told her that the best solution would be to hide under the enemy's nose. The girl called her father. The man asked his daughter in fear if everything was okay. Sin handed the phone to the teacher and shouted loudly that he was on the line. The protagonist told the man all the details of the incident over the phone. He demanded help. Gao told the guy on the phone that they were at an abandoned factory. There was a bus stop nearby. The guy demanded that the man tell the police that they needed to set up an ambush there. He would lure the kidnappers there. Gao told the man on the phone to send a squad to the back exit on the Luxia mountainside. Xing would come out from there. The man worriedly told the boy and girl on the phone to be careful. Gao promised Shi on the phone that he and his girlfriend would of course be careful. Xin asked her friend how they would lure the bandits to the bus stop. Gao asked the girl excitedly if she understood what to do. Gao turned around and slyly told the girl that they should put on a show for the kidnappers. The main character said to his girlfriend in a double voice that they needed to find something to remove the handcuffs. The leader asked his subordinates if everything was ready. The bandit told his boss that all escape routes were ready. The bandit asked the boss with interest whether they would kill the hostages after receiving the money. The leader sternly explained to his subordinate that they could not allow their victims to identify them. The leader replied to his subordinate that he would first kill the main character, since he was very cunning. The leader grabbed the phone and asked in fear what was going on. The protagonist told his boss over the phone that they had escaped. The boss told the guy that this was all impossible. Gao told the kidnapper on the phone that he would definitely tell him. At that moment, the guy signaled the girl. Sin shouted loudly that there was a bus stop near him. She needed it to be heard over the phone. The main character demanded that the happy girl be quieter. The kidnapper was still shouting something into the phone. The protagonist disconnected the connection. Gao told the girl in an exhausted voice that they had finally done it. The son asked the guy with great excitement what they should do now. The protagonist was in a warehouse next to large boxes. He told the girl that when the bandits left for the bus stop, they would have to escape through the back entrance. There, they would meet the police. The guy told himself that he had lost a lot of blood. He felt dizzy and needed to control himself. Late in the evening, a car with bandits drove up to an abandoned warehouse. Two attackers ran out from behind the car and headed into the warehouse at full speed. One of the fighters shouted in fear to the boss on the phone that their victims had escaped. The fighter informed the leader over the phone that he and the guys would comb the area. Gao stood to the side and listened. The bandit ordered his subordinates to carefully inspect everything in the warehouse. Gao and his girlfriend hid to the side. The main character thought with fear that the bandit in the warehouse would discover them sooner or later. The protagonist quietly explained to Xing that the police should be near the mountain. They should take the initiative and do something. Gao handed the girl the phone. She would have to read the message in the notes when it was safe. Gao turned around and immediately asked the girl if she was scared. Sin smiled and promised the guy that they would have a party after they got out of here. The guy slyly told his companion that she would go on a date with him as a girlfriend. Shin angrily explained to the teacher that he wanted to take advantage of her. The guy waved his hand at the girl and said that she could go. The girl obediently replied that she would do so. The protagonist watched the student run away. He thought he was scared too. Gao silently tied his top jacket at the front of his stomach. The guy approached the warehouse exit. He thought he had to keep the girl safe and sound. Sin ran to the exit of the building. She looked around carefully. The girl looked around the room and thought that she had reached the place the teacher had spoken about. The student remembered that she needed to read the message now. She took out her phone. Gao took out her telephone and began to read everything from it carefully. The schoolgirl was very scared. She dropped the device from her hands in surprise. Sin dropped the phone and it hit the floor. One of the bandits shouted that the guy was running towards the warehouse. The message on the phone said that the girl was supposed to climb out the window and run towards the park. The police were there. She needed to be brought to the warehouse. Sin didn't know what she needed to do now. She decided that she had to trust the guy. The schoolgirl looked up at the window in the wall. She decided that she had to find the police. Sin thought sadly that she had to find and bring the police here. At the same time, at the factory, Bandit swung his arm and kicked the main character. The leader told his subordinates to find the girl, but he wanted to finish off the guy. Gao, after a strong blow, sat on the ground. The main character realized with fear that he could not let the bandits find out that the girl had already escaped. Gao swung to hit the attacker. The bandit dodged to the side in time. The kidnapper joyfully shouted to his opponent that now it was his turn to hit. The bandit swung his fist with all his might and hit the main character on the head. The attacker ran up behind the guy and kicked him in the back with all his might. The kidnappers approached the guy from behind and shouted that this would be his last day. The bandit ran up behind the lying protagonist and grabbed his head with his hand. Gao told himself in a stern voice that he must not lose now. The kidnapper slammed his victim's head into the ground with all his might. The bandit put his foot on the guy's head from behind and said that he hated him from the very beginning. The exhausted protagonist remembered the girl. He thought she must be far away. Cao saw in his mind that Baizue was very unhappy because he was skipping classes again. Lulu looked slyly at the guy and suggested that they go for a walk in the park later. The main character saw his student hand him a box of his favorite cookies. Gao decided that his last hour had come. He thought with his last strength that he had been useful to his girlfriends. The main character closed his eyes. He was in an abandoned warehouse at night. After a very long time, the guy fainted, and the guy opened his eyes. Someone called him from the side. Gao lay on the bed and looked up in fear. He was in the hospital. She asked the teacher in a frightened voice if she could ask him a couple of questions. The main character thought to himself in fear that he knew the voice of the girl next to him. Sin was near the guy's bed. She asked him why he left her. Gao looked at the girl with gratitude. He realized that she had met the police and they had saved him. The guy gently reached out and touched the girl's head. She was lying with her eyes closed. Sin suddenly jumped to her feet. She called out to the teacher in a frightened voice. The main character smiled very slyly at the girl and greeted her. Sin was very scared. She began to whine sadly and called the teacher. The schoolgirl rushed towards the guy and hugged him. The main character was very surprised. The girl, with tears in her eyes, shouted in fear to the guy that she was worried about him. Kao extended his hand and said that he was fine. He stroked her head. The guy calmed the girl down. He said that she shouldn't cry like a child. At this moment, Shur coughed from the side. He wanted the young people to pay attention to him. The main character and his girlfriend looked at the man in the room with surprise. The main character abruptly pushed the girl away from him. He was very scared. The man told the protagonist with a smile that he could just call him Lu. The man promised the boy that he would never forget how he saved his daughter. Gao waved his hand at the man and said with a smile that it was also his fault. Lu smiled at the protagonist and told him not to worry about anything. He promised to do everything he could for the boy in the future. Gao asked the man with great interest what happened to the kidnappers. Lu told the guy that all the criminals had been detained by the police. He had nothing to worry about now. The father told his daughter that they could leave. Doctors would look after her teacher. Sin smiled goodbye to the main character and said that they would see each other tomorrow. The man and his daughter walked out and slammed the door. The protagonist watched them go. The doctor approached the guy and took his hand. Gao couldn't understand how many days he had been unconscious. The protagonist turned and looked away. He thought that this time he almost died. A nurse came up to the side. She told the patient that a friend had come to see him. The door to the ward opened. The protagonist told his fat friend that he could come in. The manager walked into the room through the open door. She was surprised to hear the guy's words. The girl angrily asked the main character who he decided to call fat. Gao was very surprised. He asked Bai in fear what she was doing here. The main character was in a hospital ward. Manager Bai came to see him. The girl asked the guy with displeasure who he called fat. Gao explained to the guest that he had decided it would be as if a friend had come to visit him. He asked the girl, why did she come? The girl put a basket of fruit on the nightstand. She told the surprised guy that she wanted to visit him. The patient thanked the guest. He explained that he had been unconscious for several days and had been unable to alert anyone in the company of his absence. Bai looked slyly at the guy and told him to focus on his recovery. He shouldn't worry about the company. Zhao glanced at his guest and thought that she also had a soft side. Bai brought the guy a plate with treats and told him to eat. The main character smiled and told the girl with the plate that she did well. Bai shouted at the guy in a displeased voice that he was talking too much. She shoved food into his mouth. The main character shouted angrily at the girl to be careful. He could open a wound. A nurse came up to the side and called the patient. The guy and the manager turned to the side. The nurse told the main character with a smile that a girl had come to visit him. Gao, with a piece of food in his mouth, told the nurse that the guest could come in. Bai told the protagonist with surprise that she didn't expect a girl to come to visit him. Gao explained to his interlocutor with a smile that he doesn't have a girlfriend, but only friends. The protagonist turned around in surprise. He didn't expect a student to come to him. Lulu greeted the main character and teacher Bai with excitement. The main character shouted from his bed in an irritated voice for the girl to sit down and not stand. Lulu showed the main character a box of food. She was afraid that the guy wouldn't like the hospital food. The main character looked at the girl with displeasure and silence. He didn't say anything to her. Lulu asked the guy discontentedly if he was still angry with her. Gao answered the girl that he was not angry. Gao looked at the student and thought that he was in love with her, but remained an ordinary friend. The girl handed the main character a large basket with various treats. Bai handed the guy a box of food. She happily told him that Lulu was very good at cooking. The student slyly asked the guy if he would try the food himself or if she should feed him. Bai glanced slyly at the main character and explained that the school beauty had prepared food for him. Gao picked up the food with chopsticks. He thought with fear that if he didn't try it, something bad would happen. The patient was eating with gusto. A nurse came in from the side and called him. The nurse informed the protagonist that another girl had come to see him. Bai listened attentively to all of this. Lulu looked at the entrance to the ward with great attention. She was wondering who had just arrived. At this moment, a smiling Sin ran into the room. She brought the protagonist a box of food. Sin looked ahead. She was surprised because there were some other girls next to the guy. Lulu and Bai looked at the student in amazement and silence. The main character was extremely scared. He even dropped his chopsticks in his excitement. The protagonist at the board explained that Shu Luo Chang is a scene where two or more girls compete for the same man. When the man backs down, all the girls learn about each other, and then the confrontation begins. Gao lay on his bed in the hospital room, frightened. He thought that he was really in a bad situation now. All the girlfriends turned around and looked at the guy with great displeasure. They remained silent. Gao looked at his girlfriends and thought with displeasure that none of them were his girlfriend. The main character wanted to say something to his guests. He hesitated and couldn't find the right words. The girlfriends began asking the guy with great interest and excitement what happened. Gao waved his hands in fear and shouted to his girlfriends that nothing bad had happened. The guy thought to himself with excitement that it was very scary, but he had to restrain himself. A nurse looked into the office. She told the guy that more friends had come to see him. Gao thought to himself in fear that it was very bad that someone else would come to him now. Two girls were sitting and peeling an apple for a guy. Gao glanced at them and thought that such a scene would be misunderstood. Gao suddenly extended his hand to the side. He shouted at the girls to stop. The frightened protagonist felt severe pain in his body and screamed. Lulu shouted angrily at him not to move. The other girls were also scared. A guy named Lu came in from the side with a young student. They brought the patient some food. The guy and the student were very surprised. They saw a lot of girls in the ward. The girls looked at the guests in surprise. Liu said in fear that all this was unfair. Gao shouted from his place to the girls that they should listen to him first. Sin slyly pointed her finger to the side. The other girls looked at her with interest. Bai turned to the protagonist and said that he should pay more attention to his body. Sun pretended I asked the guy how he was feeling now. Lulu glanced at the protagonist and advised him to get well soon. Gao was very surprised when he heard such compliments from the girls. Lu looked at the main character very angrily and considered him a traitor. Gao was very scared. He shouted to his friends to listen to him first. Liu and the student ran out the door. He shouted angrily at the protagonist that next time he would have a black eye in the morning. All three girls were very happy. They showed each other positive gestures. Sin told the teacher that she and her companions were leaving. She wished him a good rest. The main character sitting on the bed said to himself joyfully that his girlfriends had finally left. Guo remembered with great emotion that in the past he was always alone. He lived without the help of others. Gao looked at the food on the table. He hadn't known there could be so much activity around him before. The patient looked out the window. He thought that everyone has their own path in life. Someday people will part ways and never meet again. The protagonist gazed thoughtfully out the window and thought that his friends were nearby. He believed that all of this was just the beginning. The boy stared out the window without blinking. He decided that he had to live up to his name. The main character looked ahead with joy and thought that all this was right. The protagonist remembered that his name was Gao Fu Shuai. He studied at the Department of Theoretical Physics at Tsinghua College. The boy was tying his sneakers. After being hospitalized for a month, he was eventually discharged early. The guy approached the college gates. He didn't want to rest any longer and wanted to see his friends. The girls greeted the main character and congratulated him on his recovery. The protagonist's girlfriends began visiting him. Together, this could have driven him to his grave. A couple of days later, the protagonist was sitting in the lecture hall. He still needed to go to the hospital for medication. Gao looked at a familiar student in the study hall. He didn't understand how Lulu got into their senior group. At work, the main character was approached by the manager. She demanded that he put down the mop and rest. He still hadn't fully recovered. Still, something had changed for the protagonist. He was sitting at his girlfriend's house, holding a cup in his hands. Sin finished writing the assignments. After that, she threw the pen aside. The student looked at the guy with displeasure and told him that she was tired of writing. The main character, holding a cup in his hands, asked the girl what was going on. Sin pointed her fingers at the guy with displeasure and said that he was just sitting and drinking tea with sweets. Gao flipped through the book and shouted to the girl that she could take a break. He would check what she had done. Xing glanced at the protagonist and invited him to play together. Gao told the student that they couldn't play. The guy explained to the girl that the man hired him as a tutor and spent a lot of money on it. Sin angrily fell onto the bed and shouted that she didn't want to study. The main character calmly suggested to the girl that they argue as they had done before. The student was deep in thought. She didn't know whether to agree to an argument with the teacher. Sin angrily agreed to a bet with the guy. She promised that this time she would definitely win. Gao told the girl that if she won the bet, he would not force her to study until the next exam. The main character and the girl bumped hands. She cheerfully told him that she agreed. Gao glanced slyly at the student and thought that there were many ways he could make her study. The protagonist picked up a cookie. He slyly asked the girl what would happen if she lost. Sin was very scared. She said she thought she would kiss the teacher after losing. Gao was very scared and surprised when he heard such words from the girl. The guy pointed a stern hand at the student and explained that she could no longer change this rate. Sin glared at the teacher and confirmed that everything would be as she said. The protagonist realized that if he wins, she'll kiss him. If Mr. Liu finds out, he'll kill him. So now he needs to lose on purpose. Gao looked at the girl and asked again, "Does she really want to argue about this?" The girl fell silent. She was deep in thought and looking ahead. Sin looked slyly at the teacher and said that they could already start arguing. The main character asked the girl in fear what they were going to play. Sin extended her hand forward. She told the guy that they would play rock, paper, scissors. The winner would be the one who won 2 out of 3 games. Gao was very happy and thought with excitement to himself that he might accidentally win. The guy thought to himself that he could set up his move in front of the girl and lose on purpose. Out loud, he told her that they were starting. The main character looked at the student and said that they start on the count of 3. The protagonist assumed a fighting stance. Opposite him was a student. They prepared to fight. The main character swung his hand sharply and started the countdown. The student nervously assumed a fighting stance. By this time, the count had reached 2. The main character and the girl made identical hand gestures. The competition ended in a draw. Gao looked at the girl with displeasure and thought that the first round was a draw. Sin, with excitement and impatience, suggested to the teacher that they try again. The teacher glanced at the girl and noticed that she was nervous. He tried to predict what she would use in the next round. The protagonist showed scissors with his fingers. His rival showed a stone. Gao shouted in displeasure that he had lost. He thought that he should also lose in the next round. Sin clenched her fist with great excitement. She looked at the teacher with displeasure. The girl angrily shouted that if she won the next game, the teacher would lose. Gao told the girl with excitement that he would have to awaken his fighting spirit. The guy raised his hand with concentration and shouted at the girl to get ready. The main character got into a fighting stance and began to perform a countdown for the girl. The student closed her eyes in great fear and immediately screamed about the paper. With her eyes closed, Sin pointed her palm to the side. This symbolized the paper in the game. Sin opened one eye in fear. She thought she had unconsciously put her hand there. The girl realized she had won. Gao thought happily that his plan had worked. Gao explained to the girl in a calm voice that he had already won 2 rounds out of 3. The son was very shocked. She asked the guy, did she really win? Gao told the student with a smile that she had won. He would no longer have to force her to study. The guy slyly spread his arms out to the side. He thought that if the girl studied on her own, she wouldn't be able to blame him. The student fell silent. She quietly looked ahead and said nothing. Gao asked the schoolgirl, does she always get upset after winning? Sin was very angry. She asked the guy sternly, how is this possible? The student very excitedly suggested to her teacher to play again. Gao looked at the girl with interest and asked, what does she want to play? Sin looked at the guy with displeasure and asked him to close his eyes first. Gao closed his eyes. He couldn't understand what the girl wanted to do. The student kept repeating to herself that she couldn't bear it anymore. The schoolgirl came up and kissed the teacher. He was very surprised. The main character stood in the room with the girl, a curtain covering them. Gao silently pushed the student away from him and carefully studied her with his gaze. Xing turned around and walked away. Gao felt a strange feeling in his body. The girl stood with her back to the guy and said that it was time to finish the lesson. Gao answered the student with surprise that all this was true. He wanted to say something else. Sin pushed the surprised teacher out of the room and shouted that the lesson was over. Gao started knocking on the door with all his might. He angrily asked the girl why she kicked him out. The student said goodbye to the teacher through the door. She smiled to herself. Gao thought to himself with displeasure that the boss had set him up again. He couldn't understand anything. The protagonist saw a red racing car in front of him. He thought he saw a soft touch on his face. The guy walked up to the car and looked at his reflection in the mirror with great attention. Gao was surprised to notice very bright traces of lipstick on his face. The guy realized that a woman had just pulled up to him in a car. The protagonist began quickly wiping the lipstick marks off his face with his hand. He looked at his reflection in the side mirror. At that moment, the car's side mirror opened. The driver looked at the frightened protagonist with displeasure. Bai angrily demanded that the guy stop rubbing lipstick on her car. Gao pointed his finger at the girl in fear and asked what she was doing here. The driver shouted at the guy in displeasure that he couldn't even stop the car. She said goodbye. The car suddenly took off. The main character shouted after the girl that he was returning to the city. A few minutes later, Gao was sitting inside the car in the passenger seat. The driver couldn't understand what the guy thought about her. The main character discontentedly told the girl to look at the road. Bai slyly pointed her finger at her face. She asked the protagonist to enlighten her. Gao smiled and replied to the girl that he would not comment. He understood that Bai should not know that Xing had kissed him. Suddenly, the protagonist saw something interesting on the street. He demanded that the driver slow down. Bai asked the passenger with excitement what had happened. The car was parked near the park. A guy and his girlfriend were sitting on a bench nearby. Lulu was sitting on a bench with her friend. They were chatting happily with each other. The main character commanded the driver in a dissatisfied voice that they needed to go. Bai looked at her passenger and asked if he was okay. The main character looked out the window and replied that he was fine, only something was a little wrong. The main character answered the girl in a sly voice that he said he would let her go. Gao smiled and told the girl that there was nothing left to hold on to. He offered her to go. The protagonist was racing in a car with a girl. He shouted in fear that she was going in the wrong direction. The school was located elsewhere. Bai told the boy that no one was driving him back to school. Gao was very surprised. He fearfully asked the girl where they were going. The driver replied that they were going to her home. The main character answered the driver with displeasure that he had just lost his love, but he was not that kind of person. The girl hit the guy on the head with her fist in displeasure. She explained that her father wanted to see him. Gao told the driver with surprise that he was going to the supermarket to buy a gift for Mr. Bai. The boy ran to the entrance of the store. The girl shouted after him that her father doesn't like gifts from other people. The car pulled up to the Bai family's luxurious estate. The girl told the guy to get out. Gao looked around with great surprise. He said with admiration that the rich man's house looked elegant. A young man and a maid appeared near the entrance. They greeted Gao and his companion. Gao was very surprised that the servants called the girl elder sister. Bai slapped him in the face in displeasure. The bespectacled servant looked at the girl and said that she did not look like her ordinary sister. Bai reminded Christian not to make a mountain out of a molehill. The servant asked her for forgiveness. Baya told the servant to go ahead with her. The maid told the protagonist that they would take care of her things. Gao told her not to worry. The girl entered the house and greeted her father. Gao stood behind. The man turned around and looked at his daughter. Bai told him that she had returned and brought Gao with her. The owner was holding a newspaper in his hands. He told the guy with a smile that the girl had brought him, but she hadn't told him about it beforehand. The guy told the owner with a smile that it was a great honor for him to meet him. The protagonist brought a man a package as a souvenir. He asked the owner to take it. The father reminded his daughter that she should have warned the guy that he doesn't accept gifts. Bai responded to her father that the main character didn't listen to her. Gao folded his arms in fear and asked to be spared. Bai looked sternly at the guy and said that he did it on purpose. The main character cunningly asked the owner to look at the gift first. The man looked carefully into the package. He was curious what was in it. The owner turned around cheerfully and told the main character that he would take his gift. The man told the surprised boy not to be polite and to get inside. Bai was very surprised when she heard such words from her father. Bai grabbed the protagonist by the tie. She sternly asked, "What did he buy for her father?" Zhao quietly whispered to the girl that he had given the owner a film called Love Island. The girlfriend hit the guy with her hand in displeasure and said angrily that they had a good talk. Zhou sternly called on the protagonist to answer what it was. Fu said it was alcoholic peanuts. However, the angry Bai doubted his words and demanded that he tell her the truth. Gao smiled and said that he only had 20 yuan, so this was all he could buy. Zhen, in turn, unexpectedly interrupted their discussion and asked how his workdays were going. As soon as Shuai tried to answer him, Xiao decided to help the guy with it. As a result, the girl stepped on his foot so that Fu would not say anything unnecessary. The teenager naturally understood her hint and said that he liked his job and everything was fine. At this moment, the servant Christian brought Mr. Zhou a cup of tea. Bai suddenly mentioned that he hadn't seen the young man at work recently, reminding him of his recent conflict with manager Li. Gao, in turn, asked him for forgiveness and declared that he would follow Su's example. Zhen also asked Xiao what kind of job she had chosen for the young talent. The girl was confused and did not know how to answer, after which she began to mumble something incoherently. Shui then said that he was extremely grateful to his daughter for her help, as she appointed him as a cleaner. Of course, Shui understood that Fu had deliberately set her up, knowing what the company head's reaction would be. Shu immediately asked his daughter if she had really hired him as a cleaner. Bai lowered her head and quietly said that it was true. Zhen was clearly dissatisfied. Surprisingly, Gao decided to help Xiao out of this situation and began to protect her. Moreover, he understood perfectly well that Zhou would not ignore this. Then Shuai said that he was really grateful to her, and she did the right thing. Shu, like her father, simply froze in place, slightly perplexed. The guy in turn stated that he seriously thought so and asked to be heard. After which, he began his monologue. Because if he had come to the company for a good position, the employees would have misunderstood everything. And in order to avoid such a situation, Manager Xiao appointed him as a cleaner, which was quite logical. Surprised, Zhou asked his daughter if she had really thought of everything so brilliantly. Bai responded positively and suggested that everyone have lunch together, and naturally, everyone agreed. Suddenly, the head of the family said that Shuai should have been taught a lesson, but Fu helped her avoid punishment, adding that she is actually a good person, but she has an extremely hot temper. So Gao would have to come to terms with it. The teenager replied that he would try to do so. Zhen stated that he had initially intentionally scared the young man as soon as he crossed the threshold of his house, and he would have already returned the gift back if it had been from someone else, but Shuai's words made him think. The guy asked if it could have something to do with manager Li. Zhou smiled and noted that the kid was quite smart, but the main problem lay with Zhu's father. Fu then suggested that they might actually be plotting something bad against the Bai family. At that moment, Xiao entered the room and called everyone to the table as dinner was already ready. Suddenly, Bai asked the young man to befriend his daughter, which was quite unexpected. Shuai, in her brazen manner, demanded that Gao also join the table. The guy understood that making friends with her would not be easy, given her difficult character. After some time, the girl volunteered to take the young man home, but the result, as always, was disappointing, because Xiao still couldn't contain her emotions and urged Shuai not to sleep while she was driving. Finally, the main character got out of the car and headed to his dorm, where he met Ni on the way. The young lady, in turn, stated that she had something extremely important to talk to him about. However, the teenager was not in a good mood, and ignoring her walked past. The girl was surprised. In this regard, Wang immediately turned around and followed him, urging him to give her a couple of minutes. Fu still didn't pay attention to her and slowly walked towards the dormitory. And even when Ni told him that she wanted to talk to him about Lulu, Yao responded sharply that Lin's problems should be handled only by her boyfriend. Taken aback by such a sudden statement, Wang once again asked to be heard, saying that only he could help her, and that the matter was extremely serious. Shuai finally agreed to talk to her. A couple of minutes later, they entered the cafe and Fu asked what exactly the problem was. Ni replied that ever since Lin got involved with Tian, she had become strange and constantly ignored her. Gao decided to calm her down and stated that this was normal behavior for a person in love. However, Wang shouted angrily that Lulu always returned home late alone, but Shuai still didn't see any problem with it and hurried away. The girl continued to say that her friend constantly looked tired, but refused to name the reason for this condition. This means she needs to ask her boyfriend about it, but Lin won't give her Yu's phone number. Fu sipped his drink nonchalantly and remarked that she could report it to the police, but they were unlikely to react. Then Ni angrily shouted that Gao had to bring back the old Lulu. The stunned young man did not expect this from Van and literally froze in place. Realizing that she had gone a bit too far, the girl apologized to Fu but continued to stand her ground. After all, when Lin was friends with Shuai, she looked happy and was always cheerful. The guy listened to Ni and offered to take her to the dorm, saying that it would be better for her not to think about it and to calm down. After which, he himself went to his building. On the way, he decided to delete Lulu's contact, because he believed that sometimes in life you just have to let things slide. A couple of minutes later, Lin stood in the protagonist's way. The girl was in an unclear state. Gao, in turn, assumed that she was sleepy, as she was feeling dizzy. However, as Lulu got closer, the teenager smelled the distinct scent of alcohol. Realizing that something inexplicable was happening to her, he asked why she was drunk. At first, the girl seemed not to understand who was standing in front of her and slowly raised her eyes to the young man. As soon as Lin realized it was Shuai, she blushed sharply with shame and tried to hide her gaze. At this point, Lulu suddenly burst into tears and began to ask Fu for forgiveness. A shocked Gao didn't know what to do, but he understood that the girl definitely needed help. He suddenly remembered how he had deleted her number a couple of minutes ago and promised himself that he would forget her. But he couldn't help himself and hugged the unfortunate girl, trying in every way to calm her down, blaming the fact that he accidentally ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. At the same time, the teenager asked himself just one question: why was she crying? A moment later, Fu discovered that Lin had simply fallen asleep in his arms. His conscience struggled with the decision to reject Lulu, but his kind and empathetic side won out. Suddenly, he caught himself thinking that it was already too late and he couldn't go to the women's dormitory, because in the morning there will be bad rumors that he brought a drunk girl. Then the teenager picked up the unconscious girl and began to think about what to do next. The only way out was to go to the hotel, where he arrived with the sleeping Lin. The old man smiled and said that he would rent a nice room for them. But Shuai hastened to inform her that she was his sister and had simply had a little too much alcohol. Naturally, the establishment's employee misunderstood everything and continued to accompany them into the room with his statements. Finally, Gao led her into the room and laid her down on the bed. But at that moment, her phone rang. Fu assumed that it was her boyfriend who decided to find out how she got to the dorm. However, in reality, it was Ni, and the young man decided to ask her to call back tomorrow. As soon as he picked up the phone, a worried Wang began asking her friend why she hadn't returned. The teenager immediately interrupted her hysteria and said that they were now at the hotel with her. A stunned Ni asked Shuai again if he really took her to the hotel. The girl started shouting that Gao was rushing things too much and had no right to do this to Lin. Even if Lulu herself is not against it, it is extremely low and mean on his part. Then the main character objected that in fact it was already too late to return to the dorm, and he didn't mean any harm. He added that she would see for herself in the morning when she talked to her, and then hung up. Suddenly the teenager looked at the sweet Lin, catching himself thinking that she was very beautiful. Fu tried his best to calm down and pull himself together, but he failed. As a result, he reached out to touch her for a moment. But at that moment it seemed to him that Lulu was about to wake up as she began to move. Then Lin even said her boyfriend's name, which immediately pushed Gao away. The guy literally boiled with anger and immediately jumped out of bed, his emotions taking over. After all, he realized that all his hopes were in vain, and there was no place for him in her heart. Afterwards, Shuai covered her with a blanket and headed towards the exit in an upset state. The young man slammed the door in anger and forced himself to quickly leave the hotel. The sharp knock woke the girl up and she opened her eyes, finding herself in an unknown place. The next day, Fu went to work, where Shui appointed him as assistant manager. However, the guy's thoughts were still with Lulu, and he didn't hear Xiao's words. He was curious if Lin remembered what happened yesterday. Bei in turn turned to the young man, but he did not answer her, so the girl slapped the table. Finally, Gao came to his senses. Shui called him to give a few words at the conference, in connection with the new position. The bewildered teenager immediately stood behind the counter and hurried to collect his thoughts, after which he stated his name and began a rather lengthy monologue, speaking about the fact that his parents named him this way because they wanted to raise a successful man, but he is neither rich nor handsome. There was a deathly silence in the conference room. Everyone was perplexed by Fu's strange speech. His friends decided to support him and started shouting that the monologue was brilliant, but Xiao had a different opinion. Shuai actually began to think that he had performed well, which raised his spirits, but Bai suddenly pushed him out from behind the stand and announced the adjournment of the meeting. However, Gao stated that he was not finished with his speech yet, and an enraged Shui in turn ordered him to go to her office, where she began to furiously yell at her subordinate, saying that he should have prepared his speech and not been talking nonsense. She then provided him with records from major companies and demanded that he explain himself more clearly in the future. Fu looked through the documents in surprise and was amazed that the meeting had just ended and the notes were already ready. Xiao, in turn, began to gloat excessively because this copy would be sent to all the directors. In addition to the text, they will also be sent an audio recording of the past meeting. The protagonist was shocked by this turn of events and understood that Chief Zhou would clearly not like it. Suddenly, Zhou handed him a voice recorder and told him that he had better quickly re-record the audio recording so as not to screw up. Shuai was extremely grateful to her for her help and said that he would not make such mistakes in the future. Gao also asked her where his new workplace was, since he was now an assistant manager. Bai pointed to a battered table with a broken lamp and said that from now on, he would work there, which was a far cry from Xiao's own workspace, which had an ergonomic chair and a nice desk stocked with supplies. But this was not the biggest problem since his workplace was in Bai's office. In this regard, Fu asked whether he would really be forced to work with her in the same room. The girl grinned slyly and said that it was indeed a good question, adding that he is her personal assistant and therefore it is quite logical to arrange his place in her office. Then the teenager hinted to her that they would be in the same room all the time, and that was too much. But Bai didn't want to hear anything, and once again hurried him to redo the notes with the audio recording. Sue herself sat down in her comfortable chair, because she was too tired after the whole day. Gao, meanwhile, was working hard to finally put the records in order, constantly flashing before the eyes of the girl, who clearly liked what was happening. The young lady caught herself thinking that when a guy is serious, he is quite cute. After a certain amount of time, the person in charge, Shuai, completed the task and became incredibly tired. But he was careless enough to mention to Xiao that he was going to see Yu, and the girl's reaction was immediate. And when the young man announced that everything was ready and he was leaving, the angry Bai ordered him to work a little more. He added that if he really needed to be released quickly, he needed to quickly sort out the paperwork. After which she angrily slammed the door behind her. Fu, in turn, could not understand what had happened to her. Finally free, the young man hurried to Sin and met the butler at the house. Noticing the unknown car, Gao asked Liu if they really had guests, because if so, he could come tomorrow. The old man said that there was no need for this, but asked that Yu not enter for a while. Confused, Shuai did not understand what was happening and went into the house. After a certain time, the butler kindly asked the young teacher to come to Xing. He hastened to inform the young lady about this, who called her teacher to come in. A joyful Fu ran into the room with a gift and said that he had a little surprise. However, he discovered that she had a bigger gift for him, in the form of an unknown guy. Their eyes met and Gao couldn't understand what had happened while Yu looked upset. The stranger smiled and asked Shuai if he was really her teacher. A dumbfounded Fu answered yes, wondering who he was. The protagonist assumed that they were in a fairly close relationship. Sad Sin, in turn, in a sad voice, invited the teacher to sit down. Gao immediately asked when they could start the lesson and whether it was convenient for her to work today. Then Yu, in the same dying voice, reminded him of how the guy lost the bet to her. The unknown boy ironically remarked that he was indeed a good teacher who lost to his student. Shuai immediately responded that in fact, the end result was no different from winning. After which there was an extremely awkward silence. The teenager did not know how to behave or what to say. Suddenly the stranger announced that in that case, he would go downstairs while she resolved the issue with her teacher. However, Sin suddenly grabbed his hand and asked him not to leave, which naturally did not please Fu. The girl also suggested that they all have lunch together, but the unknown boy was not thrilled with the idea. Gao couldn't understand at all what had happened to her and why she began to behave this way. At that moment, he received an unexpected call. Hearing a strange ringtone, the stranger again began to tease the teacher. Meanwhile, Ni informed Shuai that something irreparable had happened and that he should come. The guy turned to Yu, but the girl, for some unknown reason, turned away from him. The teenager then told Van that he needed an address and that he would arrive soon. Then he hurried to say goodbye to Sin and said that he needed to go away, and their classes had to be rescheduled for another day. The young student was stunned by the teacher's actions. She hurried after him, but Fu slammed the door behind him and headed for the exit. An unknown guy started saying that he should be fired for such an attitude towards work, after which he invited Xinyu to go to his house to do homework together. The girl, in turn, was upset by Gao's behavior, who at this time rushed to help Ni in order to finally understand what had happened. Upon seeing Shuai, Wang immediately called out to him, looking extremely worried. The teenager asked what happened and why it was necessary to travel across the entire city. The girl claimed that she had actually followed Lulu and discovered the horrible details. She then turned him towards the nightclub and said that Lin had gone there. Shocked, Fu couldn't understand why a little girl would visit such dubious establishments. She did not notice that she did not dare to go to this place alone, and therefore called him. The brave young man declared that she had done the right thing, urging her to stay outside. Gao himself headed towards the club and said that there would most likely be problems. Therefore, if necessary, she will need to call the police immediately. The girl was very scared and asked the guy for only one thing: to get her friend out. Shuai, in turn, was determined and went inside the night establishment. He wanted to help Lulu get her life in order and figure everything out no less than Van. Once inside, the protagonist realized that he needed to ask someone about Lin, since he couldn't find her in such a crowd of people. In connection with this, the guy went to the bartender and said that he had some business for him. The club employee immediately declared that for 50 yuan, he would tell the teenager everything he was interested in. A stunned Gao began to rummage through his wallet, but found only one coin. Relying on luck, the young man handed him a coin and said that in his haste, he had forgotten to take money with him. The bartender threw a coin at him and said that in that case, there was nothing he could do. However, Shuai still found an approach to the nightclub employee and got him talking. Ultimately, the guy agreed to share the much-needed information. Fu immediately asked if a very cute girl had come here. The bartender replied that there were many of them here, and Gao rephrased and called her a sophisticated lady. The employee's eyes immediately lit up, and he declared that Lulu was quite famous here. He added that she came to them one night, and he was surprised by the appearance of the princess in such a place. Shuai then asked him to arrange a meeting with her, but the bartender said that even Gongzi could not get her. Fu didn't expect that it would really be so difficult to see her. In connection with this, he began to find out how much it would cost for her to keep him company. The guy replied that she just hands out drinks to customers and doesn't do anything bad. Gao sighed with relief and asked why she got a job as a waitress here. At that moment, the bartender saw Lin and pointed at her, saying that the boy was really lucky, because today she was working in this room. Meanwhile, the girl served various alcoholic drinks to visitors. The employee of the establishment noticed that she was an incredibly beautiful girl, and asked if he was her boyfriend. Shuai ignored his question and immediately rushed towards her, asking her to give him a couple of minutes. However, Lin was not thrilled with his presence and said she had to work. But the teenager insisted, assuring her that their conversation would not take much time, and finally, she agreed. Some of the visitors did not like the fact that a stranger was pestering her and wanted to inform Gongzi about it. Meanwhile, a puzzled Fu asked Lulu why she took a job there and why she needed money. After all, most likely even her boyfriend didn't know about this. The girl abruptly lowered her gaze. Lin started to get nervous and continued to silently look at the floor. Gao decided to comfort her, talking about how important she is to him, even though there is no place for him in her life. But when she is in trouble, he cannot find peace. At that moment, Shuai took her hand. Fu said that despite this, he would always support her in everything. The young lady was touched by his poignant speech, and tears began to well up in her eyes. Suddenly, she began to ask him for forgiveness, while the teenager urged her to return to normal life. After some time, Lin finally calmed down, and the protagonist said that it would be better for them not to linger here. But just at that moment, an unknown person called out to the girl, and naturally she recognized that voice. As soon as Lulu turned around, Gongzi poured water on her. The girl did not expect such a turn of events. A stunned Gao asked her if she was okay and who she was. Lin tried to get up and replied that she was fine. Fu immediately rushed to her. The guy threw his jacket over her so that the young lady would not catch a cold under any circumstances. Li, in turn, apologized to her, saying that the glass had slipped from his hands. After which, he approached Lulu and stated that he was able to take care of her personally. At the same time, he extended his hand towards her, which Shuai immediately removed from her shoulder. Extremely indignant, Gongzi began to ask who he was and what he was doing. Gao knew that it was best to avoid fights for now, as Lin's safety came first. Li asked the girl sternly if she was really going to leave now. After all, her shift hasn't ended yet, and doing this in the middle of the workday is prohibited. Otherwise, this threatens a fine or even dismissal without any payment. But Lulu insisted that she needed to change her clothes so as not to catch a cold. Gongzi smiled and said that it was no problem at all and he would be happy to help her, because he has suitable outfits for her in his room, and she can choose any of them. The girl made every effort to deny it and asked him to stop this performance. Fu, in turn, could not stand it, and began to shout at the impudent fellow not to cross the line, after which he dealt him a crushing blow. Li did not expect such a turn of events. As a result, the guy fell to the floor in extreme pain, and everyone was in shock. His henchmen immediately rushed to him to help him up, asking if he was okay. The shocked Gongzi grabbed his cheek, but did not hold back in his statements. Shuai once again ordered him not to touch Ling and threatened to kill him. Li immediately jumped up and said that since the boy decided to play the hero, he would satisfy his desire. Then he grabbed the bottle and added that he started it, so he would have to answer for it. Gongzi suddenly smashed the bottle on the table and rushed towards the teenager. He ordered his accomplices to clear the area of guests in order to deal with the upstart. A worried Lulu urged Shuai to leave immediately as the consequences could be dire. Thus, the armed bandits freed themselves and continued to provoke Fu. One of them suddenly appeared behind the main character, but the guy didn't panic, realizing that he needed to escape with Lin as quickly as possible to keep her safe. Meanwhile, the girl called the police, saying that they would arrive soon, after which she again called on her savior to run away, because it would cost her nothing to apologize to them. However, Gao couldn't allow them to bully the poor girl and, of course, stayed with her until the end. One of Li's gang remarked that he could not stand against Gongzi and that it would be better if he listened to Lin. Then he hastened to attack the young man, but he did not know what outcome awaited him. Shuai immediately grabbed his hand, making it clear that he was not some amateur in martial arts. The thug was shocked by the guy's incredible reaction and couldn't believe what was happening. Then Gao began to twist the arm of Li's naive servant in an extremely painful manner. In the end, Fu knocked the bandit down, demonstrating his skills to the fullest extent. So he ended up on the floor, but at that moment he was walked around from the other side. But Shuai didn't have time to react in time, only hearing footsteps behind him, after which the big guy hit him on the back with a stool, and the guy fell to the ground. The other one instantly grabbed the girl, not giving her the opportunity to help her savior. Cao noticed that the wounds he had previously received began to hurt even more. Gongzi, in turn, received genuine pleasure from what was happening, saying that the kid had gotten into trouble and he wouldn't be able to resist him. After all, now he finds himself in a situation where his life is in danger. Li picked up the broken bottle again and rushed towards the fallen Gao. Suddenly, Lulu shouted loudly for him to release Shuai immediately. And indignant Li noted that he was the one who started attacking them first, so he should answer for his actions. Then he offered Lin an alternative option that would not harm her friend. The girl burst into tears, realizing that she had no other choice and would have to submit to him. Fu, in turn, thought that he had ruined everything again, because he just wanted to support Lulu. Gongzi continued to persuade the girl to compromise in order to save the guy, having offered her a good drink first to ease the tension. However, even in this situation, Gao did not give up and snatched the broken bottle from Li's hands. Gun didn't have time to react in time, just like his henchman, who didn't keep an eye on Fu. The teenager put a bottle to Li's neck and declared that he had started to rejoice too early, after which he ordered all his accomplices to stand still. Otherwise, their boss would say goodbye to his life. Gongzi instantly turned into a coward who tried to calm the protagonist down. But the young man did not fall for his tricks and ordered that Lulu be released immediately, which they did. Gao asked the girl if everything was okay with her, and Lin answered positively. Shuai then demanded that his people no longer hinder them and give them the opportunity to leave the club. Li immediately ordered his thugs to step aside and let them pass to the exit. Fu understood that the police could arrive at any moment, and there was also video surveillance outside. Soon the guy urged the girl to go out onto the street first, where Van was, and catch a taxi. However, Lulu began to contradict him, but the teenager quickly brought her to her senses and ordered her to do as he said. Lin immediately rushed to the exit as Li had promised. No one blocked her path. Gongzi, in turn, tried to outwit the young man, asking him to let him go, since they had fulfilled the main requirement, claiming that they really just wanted to play a little and overdid it. Naturally, Li's minions began to play along with him and claimed that this was indeed true. Z himself noted that the guy was quite brave and they should become friends. Gao wasn't that stupid and ignored his tricks, then suddenly pushed Gong forward. Thus he collapsed to the floor, and Shuai himself rushed to leave the nightclub. An embittered Li immediately ordered his henchmen to catch up and beat up the boy. The armed thugs immediately began to carry out the boss's orders. But by that time, the teenager had managed to run out into the street, where he suddenly discovered Shuai. Bai tried her best to calm the tearful Lulu, and at that moment she saw Fu. A stunned Gao asked what she was doing there, and where Ni was with the police. Xiao did not answer, and hurried him to get into the car, as bandits were chasing him. Lin also hurried to get into the car to make it before the thugs arrived, which in turn had already almost caught up with them, in connection with which Shuai called on Shui to rush forward. The girl smiled absolutely calmly and said that there was nothing to worry about anymore, after which she sharply turned the car around and drove away from Gongzi's servants. Finally, Fu sighed with relief, and noted that it was all over and they were safe. Lin thanked him for his help and suddenly noticed that the young man had a pale face. She asked if he was okay, but Gao suddenly fell silent. The girl repeated the question again. Shuai replied that he just needed to rest a little, after which he lost consciousness and fell right on Lulu, which naturally did not please Bai, who began to demand that he immediately get up from the poor girl, but Fu was already asleep. After a certain amount of time, the main character woke up in a hospital ward and saw Lin in front of him. An extremely concerned Lulu inquired about his health and ran up to him. Cao said in a tired voice that he felt much better at the sight of her. The girl immediately covered herself with her hands and backed away. The guy stated that he didn't mean it that way, after which he jumped out of his hospital bed and said that he was truly full of strength. However, a moment later his back cracked and his body was pierced by incredible pain. Shui lay down in bed again. Lulu noted that the doctor had strongly recommended bed rest for him. Fu didn't argue and said that he was very afraid for her, because she had no place in that ill-fated club. As soon as the girl wanted to tell him something, the teenager urged her to go home and rest, adding that if she had any further problems, they would definitely discuss them tomorrow. But Lulu declared that he was hurt because of her, and she had to help him. At that moment, the phone suddenly rang. Gao became wary, assuming that it was her boyfriend or Gongzi calling. Lin abruptly turned her sad gaze to the guy, and the young man immediately realized everything. In connection with this, he once again said that everything was fine with him, and she could go. The young lady looked pitifully at the teenager and said that she urgently needed to leave, after which she asked him for forgiveness. Shuai only smiled at her in response. Lulu mentioned that she would visit him tomorrow, and that he should get a good night's sleep. Suddenly, Fu said that in fact, she didn't have to take care of him and come here. Lin ran out of the room and Gao was overcome with horror, because the guy understood that it would be better for her not to come to him anymore, so that he would not get nervous. Meanwhile, Xing was running through the hospital corridors, looking for Shuai's room. Finally finding her, the girl opened the door and asked her teacher if he was okay. However, she didn't like the picture she saw of a nurse changing his bandage. Surprised, Gao asked the girl what she was doing there and why she came. Yu, in turn, stared at the teacher's naked torso and immediately turned away. Having stated that the teacher should get dressed, her voice suddenly began to tremble. Sin added that since she saw him like this, she should take care of him. Fu replied that she was making rather strange conclusions, and the nurse immediately hurried out. Then the young lady turned around and began muttering something incoherently under her breath, after which she finally asked the teenager for forgiveness, which surprised him even more. Shuai put on a hospital gown and asked what had happened again. Yer replied that it was because of her that he went to the bar to get drunk out of grief, since she rejected him that day. Gao didn't expect to hear something like that, and stood there in bewilderment, not knowing what to say to her. Suddenly, Xinyu burst into tears and said that Uncle Liu had told her about it. Fu urged her not to cry and suddenly remembered that before leaving, he had indeed told the butler that he was going to the bar. Meanwhile, Yu did not stop crying, and the teenager did not know how to get out of this situation. For some time, the girl could not calm down. The main character was confused, after which he stated that in fact his wounds were in no way connected with her, or what happened that day. However, Sin did not believe him and urged him to stop deceiving her because in her opinion it was logical. Shuai still stood his ground and said that everything was completely different from what she had imagined. Suddenly, the girl calmed down and asked if the teacher was no longer angry with her. Then, the young man asked her a counter question, because he was interested in the identity of that stranger. In this regard, Gao became curious about who this unknown boy was who was in her room. Ike replied that he was the son of her father's friend, and his name was Long Tao, but they were just friends, adding that she knows about his feelings for her, and that they are from the same school. But Sin claimed that she was completely indifferent to him, and that they had nothing serious. The young man again urged her to calm down and noted that he understood that the boy was just her friend, although it looked strange, as if she wanted to hide their relationship. Suddenly the girl blushed and looked mysteriously at her teacher, after which she asked the teacher to close his eyes for a peace offering. Naturally, Shuai refused the surprise, knowing full well what she wanted to do. Yu asked if he was still angry with her, and that was why he wasn't interested in her gift. Gao remained silent, which made Xing think, and she repeated the question again. Finally, Fu replied that he was not angry with her and that she had misunderstood everything, after which he agreed to accept the surprise from her, only asked not to leave lipstick on his face, adding that she must act within the bounds of what is permitted and not cross the line. The girl, in turn, promised that everything would be fine, and the teenager closed his eyes. Then she reached out to kiss him and also closed her eyes. Shuai was in shock. He immediately backed away and urged her to calm down, but the young lady was extremely persistent. Meanwhile, Wang and Shui were walking along the hospital corridor towards Gao's room. A moment later, Bai entered the room and saw an unimaginable picture. She was also shocked by what was happening, and the guy immediately said that they had misunderstood everything. The embittered girl silently watched this scene and literally boiled with anger. At this moment, Jinyu finally got her way and kissed Fu on the cheek. The young man did not know how to react. Xiao was furious and didn't mince words. Shuai got into trouble again. The only one who was pleased with herself was Yu, who broke into a smile. Wang closed her eyes completely, not understanding how Gao could have fallen so low and allowed something like this to happen. There was Sin's lipstick on his cheek, and the stunned guy immediately began to wipe it off, not understanding how he constantly manages to get into such ridiculous situations. At this time, the nurse approached the protagonist's room and didn't even have time to open the door. As Yu ran out of it in tears, she was most likely ashamed of her actions. The bewildered hospital employee just looked at her, not understanding what had happened. In this regard, she decided to visit Fu later when everything was settled. Thus, Gao was left alone with two extremely dissatisfied girls. The frightened teenager climbed onto the bed and asked what they were going to do. An indignant Wang said menacingly that he was a terrible person because last night Shuai was with Lulu, and today he was already with Yu. The guy, in turn, stated that in fact nothing bad had happened and the nurse could confirm this. The enraged Bai naturally did not believe him and urged Ni to go around him from the other side. To prevent this brat from escaping, Wei was literally beside herself with anger. But suddenly Wang rushed to the exit and said that she would personally find out everything from the nurse. Fu followed after her, but the angry Xiao grabbed him sharply and dragged him back. Then she began to interrogate him about what exactly he had done to Lin last night. Gao understood that he wouldn't be able to explain it to her, since she simply wouldn't believe him. So he decided to distract her and asked why she was near the club yesterday, and why the police didn't come. Bai replied that yesterday she received a message from him asking her to call law enforcement officers. Shuai was surprised and said that he clearly remembered sending it to Wang, not to her. Then he saw a missed call from Shuai and asked if she called him yesterday. Bai answered positively. She said she wanted to discuss work matters, but Fu couldn't understand how she ran into Lulu. She said that at that moment she was nearby and met Ni, who told her everything. This coincidence seemed extremely suspicious to the teenager, as if someone had deliberately set it all up. Just when Gao was starting to feel happy that everything had worked out, he came across another complaint from the girl. She urged him in every way to stay out of trouble and to take at least a little care of himself. Meanwhile, Wang returned to the room and reported that the doctor had cleared him for discharge from the hospital. Moreover, the hospital covered all the expenses, which the young man was extremely surprised by. Yud explained that her company had in fact paid for all the services, and Fu was overjoyed prematurely, because Bai stated that all expenses for hospitalization and further treatment would be deducted from his salary. Suddenly, Wang began to thank Xiao on behalf of Lin and the others, because they had given Shuai the opportunity for career advancement. A stunned Zhui called on Ni to shut up immediately, but it was too late, because Gao began to guess what was really going on and demanded an explanation. Xiao noted that it didn't matter so much now, since he also suffered because of Lulu, adding that in reality, Lin didn't just get a job at a nightclub for no reason. The young man was shocked by this information and urged her to tell the whole truth. Then Bai said that the main reason for Lulu's behavior was because of her boyfriend. The indignant protagonist asked why exactly she did this. Xu said that Tian was set up by a business partner, and that's why Lin signed the contract with the club to ease the pressure on Yu. For Shuai, this was another blow, because he realized that she was truly ready to do anything for him. Ni in turn noted that Mr. Bai had already found out that this agreement was not legally binding. Shai realized that in reality, this contract only scared off the youth, and it was necessary to conduct a certain training course for them. Van agreed. Suddenly, Zhu cast a displeased glance towards the teenager, after which she asked him what he was constantly thinking about. A sad Gao approached the window. He then stated that in some ways he envied Lulu's boyfriend, for whom she had made such sacrifices. He added that apparently in his past life, Tian saved humanity, since they are trying so hard for him. The girls felt sorry for Fu for a moment, as he tried in vain to win Lin's favor. Suddenly, Bai headed towards the exit and called for Wang to follow her. The girl immediately ran out after the teacher, completely forgetting about Shuai. After a few days, the teenager had fully recovered, which naturally owes a lot to Shuai. After which, Gao jokingly called Xinyu and said that he felt much better without her lipstick. The young man never saw Lulu again, which only benefited him. As soon as Fu returned to work, he was met by Auntie Wang, who called out to the boy. The woman greeted Shuai and asked why he had been absent for a long time. Gao replied that he had taken a few days off because he was unwell, but that he was fine now. Wang noticed that he arrived at the office quite early, as young people are usually less punctual. Suddenly, the woman asked him if he had a girlfriend or a wife. Fu didn't expect such a blunt question and answered in the negative, asking in return why she was interested in this. The aunt said that in that case he needed to be introduced to her granddaughter. Of course, Shuai declined this meeting and noted that he had too much to do. However, Wang insisted on her own and began to compliment Gao, saying what a good person he was. By that time, the elevator had already descended to the first floor and the teenager hurried to get into it. Realizing that it would be better for him to avoid such conversations, and especially meetings now. Then the woman said that she would definitely introduce him, but on another day, Fu only smiled sweetly in response. He himself sighed with relief, catching himself thinking that old people always want to set their granddaughters up with someone. At this moment, Shuai heard a malicious laugh from the side and turned around. Shui was standing in front of him. At one point, she couldn't hold back her laughter, which only frightened Gao. The extremely dissatisfied young man asked what made her so happy and why she was following him. Bai said through laughter that he had even already been invited on a blind date. The angry guy in turn noted that this shouldn't bother her. She said that he was too concerned about this issue because it was just a date. The protagonist became furious and asked if she really wanted to instill guilt in him. Then he counterattacked and said that she came to work early because she hadn't had a relationship for a long time. This only angered the already hot-tempered girl, who immediately made it clear to him who was the boss here, after which she ordered him, as her personal assistant, to bring her a cup of coffee. An angry Shuai replied that he was her assistant, not a servant, and would not make her coffee. Then Bai showed him the receipt for the hospitalization and treatment, making it clear that he owed her. Naturally, he had nothing to cover up this fact with, and he obediently went to the buffet, where he continued to express his dissatisfaction, but this time to the coffee machine. Suddenly, Gao found a silver lining in the situation. Once he repaid her debt, he would be freed from slavery. The only question was when exactly this would happen. Soon, Shuai brought her coffee into the office. The teenager noticed that the girl was trying to reach the top shelf, but she was unable to do so. Then, like a real assistant, he decided to help her get the necessary folder with documents, which he did a moment later, and the young man smiled at her, surprising Shui. The young lady thanked him and remarked that he had indeed come at the right time. Fu caught himself thinking that they could actually get along, even though he had been furious just a couple of minutes ago. As a result, the teenager pretended to be offended and turned away from his boss. But at that moment, he noticed that the stand of several books under Xiao's feet began to wobble. A few seconds later, a couple of books flew out from under Bai's feet, and she couldn't hold on. Shuai urged her to be careful, but it was already too late and the girl was flying down. She had nothing to grab onto and the fall was inevitable, but Gao came to the rescue. Confused, she closed her eyes, but a moment later she felt a soft landing. Fu said that everything was fine, and then Jue opened her eyes, finding herself on top of the boy. She immediately felt ashamed and hurried to get up, realizing that he had deliberately placed himself under her so that she would not get hurt. Then, with a calm expression, she said that everything was fine with her and that he shouldn't worry so much. However, Bai stood up too quickly and crashed into the cabinet, causing it to shake. As a result, the sideboard began to fall on her, and books began to fall from the shelves. Thus, she was crushed by the weight of the cabinet, and Shuai once again rushed to help. The guy tried to put him in his place, but he was hardly able to do it. At the same time, Fu asked Jue if she was hurt and if everything was okay. The girl thanked Gao and tried to step aside, but did not have time to step back. Unexpectedly for himself, the guy noticed that she could be sweet and kind. For a moment, he forgot about the sideboard, which continued to fall on them. The protagonist held the extremely heavy cabinet with all his might and declared that everything would be fine. Bai caught herself thinking that Shuai, it turns out, could be courageous. However, Fu's strength was running out and the servant began to win this fight. Ultimately, the sideboard collapsed on them and pinned them to the floor. Everything happened quite quickly, and Gao didn't have time to do anything before he was already on Xiao. It was much harder for the girl, because she was under the weight of the guy and the bulky sideboard. As a result, she began to scream for the teenager to immediately get up from her and move the cabinet. Meanwhile, an inspired Lee was heading down the corridor towards Bai's office, who opened the door a couple of seconds later and happily announced that he had a gift for Shui. But suddenly he discovered a rather interesting picture, which left him perplexed. Fu recognized his voice and realized that it was Shui who had decided to go to see his boss. Bai continued to yell angrily for Shui to finally get off her because she was in pain. Gao immediately called on Li to help them move the sideboard that had accidentally fallen on them. Shui also recognized him as the impudent cleaner and replied that he had no right to order him around. Soon, of course, he helped them get out and offered to take Xiao to the hospital for an examination. Fu was in extremely poor condition, having just recovered from recent injuries. But suddenly Bai ignored Li, seeing how unwell the teenager was. Then she went up to him and said that with his injuries he shouldn't move much, and that he should see a doctor. After which, she ordered Shui to find someone to clean her office while she took Shuai to the hospital. Li, in turn, was stunned by such behavior from his beloved boss. After a certain amount of time, the girl safely delivered the young man to the hospital. After examining him, the nurse concluded that there was nothing serious, but he would be better off avoiding any strenuous activity in the near future. Then the girl smiled slyly. Naturally, they understood what she was talking about and blushed sharply. After which they unanimously declared that they were not husband and wife, but boss and subordinate. The young nurse in turn did not argue, but her smile did not leave her face. Su immediately said that since everything was fine, he should go to campus to rest. A puzzled Shuai asked if she didn't also want to be examined for various bruises. Bai replied in the negative and added that she was in too much of a hurry to get back to work. Besides, her bones are not as fragile as his and she never panics prematurely. Naturally, Xiao deliberately provoked the teenager into aggression, which he immediately fired back at her. Subsequently, their relationship, as always, took its usual course of development. Gao caught himself thinking that he had never met anyone nicer than Xinyu. At this moment, the nurse wrote out a hospital bill for Fu in the amount of 461. Fu realized with bitterness that with all the deductions he would not receive his salary this month. Turning around, the young man suddenly bumped into the butler Lu and asked if he was feeling unwell. But the old man said that the young lady urgently needed his help. After a certain amount of time, the protagonist, along with Lu, arrived at Xinyu's house, where Zhang's servant led Shuai into Shu's office. The teenager greeted the head of the family. Yu's father kindly asked the boy to sit down and keep them company. Gao saw a man unknown to him, after which Jin introduced him to his friend named Lun. They also worked together in the company. The gentleman immediately said that he had heard about the young talent who had made a diligent student out of Yu. He added that he couldn't even believe Fu's incredible tutoring abilities. Shui modestly replied that it was not his fault, since Xing was indeed a talented girl. At that moment, an extremely joyful Yu suddenly ran into the room and approached her teacher. The young lady unexpectedly took his arm and said that she had been waiting for him for a long time. A stunned Gao urged her to behave more modestly, since they were not in that situation now. Tao was shocked by the girl's behavior and could not believe that she was so interested in him. Shai immediately reprimanded her and asked her to behave more restrainedly, but Long was perplexed. Finally, the girl came out of the office and announced that she had a gift for the teacher. Tao also expressed a desire to go up to the room with her, which he informed his father about. As he passed by Shuai, the teenager gave him a characteristic look, making it clear that he didn't like him, and the feeling was mutual. At the same time, Gao couldn't understand why the Long family was acting as if he was their worst enemy. Soon they began to discuss the influence of the Bai family, intending to somehow influence the situation. Fu decided not to meddle in other people's affairs and hurried out of Jin's office to go to his daughter. However, Shui suddenly asked him about the Bai family, calling on him to express his opinion about them. The surprised guy asked again if Mr. Lu was really interested in his opinion. Jin smiled and confirmed his words, saying that he was extremely curious to hear his opinion on this matter. Gao didn't expect to find himself in such a situation since he worked for the Bai family. Unexpectedly, Lun said that an ordinary tutor doesn't understand anything about such matters. But she assured him that Fu was an out-of-the-box thinker, and that was why he needed his advice. Then the young man collected his thoughts and asked forgiveness in advance for his possibly erroneous statement. He then said that both corporations were quite successful, but Bai's company lacked resources, and Lu's lacked creative thinking. Therefore, instead of fighting, it would be best for them to unite for mutual prosperity, since they have complementary means. Lun, in turn, stated that they have been competing in the market for many years, and this is out of the question. However, she liked the tutor's opinion, and he asked Hui, who suddenly appeared, about it. The teenager turned around and saw Xiao in the doorway, which made him confused. The girl noted that Teacher Gao was indeed a smart man, and she would like to know the details of his proposal. Lun, in turn, was shocked by the unexpected appearance of a direct competitor. No less stunned, Shuai asked her how she ended up there. Bai smiled and said that doing business was a natural thing for her, and that was why she was here. The young man assumed that she had actually spoken about these matters this morning. Fu instantly turned his gaze to the pleased Jin and realized that they had already planned everything. Shi, in turn, kindly invited Shui to join them to discuss possible cooperation. The girl sat down next to Gao and urged him to act according to the situation. He immediately asked if she had spoken about these matters today. Xiao answered positively. Lu immediately suggested getting down to business, because Miss Bai was an extremely busy person. However, Lun stated that the tutor was clearly unnecessary in such a matter, and that he should leave the premises. But Xu stated that Fu was her personal assistant, and therefore, he would be present during the negotiations, which left him perplexed. Lun asked again if this was really true. The young lady repeated her answer, and the protagonist immediately broke into a sly grin. Jane remarked that he simply dreamed of having an assistant like Teacher Shuai. Adding that Bai was simply talented at recruiting personnel, the girl smiled sweetly at Shai. Xu asked if it was true that Teacher Gao had perfected Xing's skills. Fu, meanwhile, realized why Lu actually called him, to get closer to Xiao and calm Lun down. After a certain amount of time, they discussed issues of interest to them regarding joint cooperation. Shui still found a way to get to Yu, as he understood that she had been waiting for him for a long time. The guy immediately went to her room and knocked on the door, but no one answered. Then the teenager entered her room and saw Tao, who was literally incinerating him with his gaze. A puzzled Gao asked where Xing was, but the young man ignored his question, after which he asked what kind of relationship he had with Yu, calling him an old man. This made Fu angry, but he managed to restrain himself in time and tried to calm down. Then absolutely calmly and naturally, he replied that she was his student and nothing more. Then the impudent boy offered him 20,000 yuan so that Shuai would never show up in that house again. Gao decided to play this exciting game with him, and noted that it was too little for such a demand. The young man said it was quite predictable, and offered 50,000. Fu continued to inflate his value and once again said that this was not enough. The enraged teenager suddenly offered 70,000 and Shuai said he had to think about it. Then Tao raised it to 80,000 yuan and the guy agreed to these conditions. The boy handed him a check for the amount and urged him to leave immediately. But Gao noted that if Yu did not let him go, it was not his fault. However, at the moment of handing over the check, Sin came in and froze in place, perplexed. After which the girl asked what they were doing and what they were talking about. Tao stated that her teacher had something extremely important to tell her. At the same time, the young man affectionately called her Xiaoyu, which infuriated her, and the reaction followed immediately. Then the young lady took the teacher by the hands and asked what exactly he wanted to tell her. Shui collected his thoughts and said that today would be the last time he would teach her a lesson. The girl immediately burst into tears, not understanding what had happened and why he had decided so. Tao, in turn, was stunned by such a statement, because they had agreed that Fu would leave immediately. Yu started saying that she was clearly a burden to him and had already become boring to him. Gao immediately rushed to refute her guesses and said that this was not the case at all, after which he asked if his presence was really that important to her and if he should stay. Naturally, Xinyu replied that she wanted him to stay and not go anywhere. Stunned by the girl's desire, Tao didn't know how to influence the situation. The main character hugged Yu and said that in that case, he would of course stay. Lun understood that the guy did it on purpose and simply deceived him, receiving a lot of money in the process, in connection with which the enraged boy declared that he would not leave it like this and headed for the exit. After which he slammed the door on the other side. Sin only followed him with her gaze. Then the puzzled girl asked the teacher what had happened. Fu then showed her a check for a large sum of money and said that Tao was trying to buy it and throw it out of her house. The young lady became furious and said that he had crossed all boundaries. Gao, in turn, noted that in fact he was also to blame for what happened. Yu asked how much he paid Shuai to make him leave this house. The teenager replied that he had paid 80,000 yuan, but that was not the point. However, the girl nervously stated that this was an extremely small amount for such a request, adding that she wouldn't agree to let go of her beloved teacher even for 1 million. The young man was shocked by such a statement from the young talent, and suddenly fell silent. Xing continued to argue that Fu could not be exchanged for money, and that Tao had acted basely. Then she once again urged Gao not to leave her alone, no matter what happened. Shui found this conversation rather strange, but on the other hand, he understood Yu's feelings. After which the guy asked her what she wanted to talk to him about earlier. Xinyu thought for a while and suddenly remembered, causing her to run to the chest of drawers. Soon she returned to the teacher with the phone and said that it was a gift for him. He didn't expect such a surprise and asked why she decided to give him a phone. The happy girl said that she wanted to please the teacher, especially since he likes this brand. Gao, in turn, could not explain to her that he simply could not afford another mobile phone. Then he said that since it was a gift from the heart, he did not dare refuse it. Shui also gave Xinyu homework, saying that she should finish everything before his next visit. But the capricious girl did not want to do anything. Fu insisted on his own. A passing butler suddenly heard their argument. Soon the young man hurried back to his campus. Yu said that Lu would take him, but the teenager refused. Meanwhile, it was already getting dark, and Gao was wandering through the dark streets, thinking about what had happened. Unexpectedly, on the way to the bus stop, he met Aunt Wang and called out to her. Seeing her holding 2 bags, Shuai, like a true gentleman, decided to help her carry the groceries home. But when he took the bags in his hands, he was suddenly pressed to the ground. Van asked to return at least 1 bag to her. As a result, Fu gave his aunt 1 of the bags and they strolled towards her house. Gao remarked that the woman was extremely strong to carry such heavy bags, but Wang said that she was already used to it. After seeing his aunt off, Shuai hurried to the bus stop, which he reported to Wang, and the old woman smiled. Then she suddenly asked the young man if he was free in the evening. Fu was not prepared for this question, and began to mumble something incoherently under his breath. As a result, the woman invited him to dinner at her home, saying that her granddaughter would also come to her. The teenager was shocked that Wang still hadn't gotten this idea out of her head. After some time, the main character was already at his aunt's house to meet her granddaughter. Standing at the front door of the woman's apartment, Gao continued to try in vain to avoid this fate. However, the old woman assured him that he would definitely like her granddaughter. Finally, Wang inserted the key into the keyhole and turned it, then opened the door. But a strange picture appeared before them. The house was in complete disarray. All the things were carelessly scattered around the apartment. Shuai, like the old woman, was shocked and did not know what to do. Suddenly, Auntie started to panic and shouted that there was a thief in her apartment. Fu immediately called her to check if the valuables were still there, and what exactly had been stolen. The stunned woman immediately rushed to run around the apartment and examine all the things. Gao carefully stepped over the scattered objects on the floor and tried to find something that would explain what had happened. Suddenly, his gaze fell on a certain notebook, and he immediately rushed towards it out of curiosity. It turned out to be a high school girl's textbook. The boy slowly reached for the book. Shui guessed that her granddaughter's name would be inside and decided to test his guess. As Fu leafed through the textbook, he wanted to know if he and Auntie Wang's granddaughter knew each other. However, at that moment, the old man hit him on the head with a pillow several times, thinking that he was a thief. A moment later, the woman apologized for the grandfather's behavior and asked the young man to sit on the sofa. She herself ran for ice to apply it to the injured guest's head. The main character sat on the sofa and thought about only one thing: why he met this old woman. At this time, Gao heard the old people talking because the door was open. As it turned out, the granddaughter had caused this mess and pretended that there was a thief in the apartment because she didn't want to meet anyone. In connection with this, the teenager hastened to leave this madhouse and never appear in it again. Shuai immediately said goodbye to the old men and said that he still had a lot of things to do. After which, the guy opened the front door, realizing that today was clearly not his day. Wang apologized for the incident, but Gao rushed to leave their house. Finally reaching the landing and heading towards the elevator, the teenager sighed with relief. Suddenly, Fu decided to check the time and started looking for the phone that Xinyu had given him. Shui kept patting his pockets, hoping to find the phone, but he never found it. This literally made Gao furious, since he was most likely in Wang's apartment. And no matter how much he didn't want to return to the house of strange people, it had to be done. The elevator doors opened. The young man thought of only one thing: he needed to return his cell phone as quickly as possible. However, in the doorway, the guy saw a rather familiar girl's face. Fu was perplexed when he recognized her as Lulu, and simply froze in place. Lin was also shocked by such an unexpected meeting with him and did not know what to say. The main character could not understand whether fate would not give him a chance to get rid of this girl. After all, she brought him only pain and suffering, but this must come to an end. However, every time Gao meets her, his heart skips a beat and he can't think of anything. The elevator doors suddenly began to close. The lovers continued to look at each other. But at the last moment, they pulled the doors with their hands and opened the elevator, which was quite difficult to do, especially for a fragile girl like Lulu. At first, they looked at each other for a long time and did not say a word, after which they suddenly laughed and once again met each other's eyes. Shui finally said that he came to visit someone. Lin called it an incredible coincidence. Gao immediately broke into a smile and noted that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The girl also smiled and said that time flies by quickly and there is nothing to be done about it. After which an awkward silence overtook them again. Lulu slowly lowered her eyes to the floor. Something unthinkable was happening inside the boy. He understood that they were not on the same path, but his heart did not let her go. Suddenly, Lin said that she needed to leave, and naturally, Fu didn't stop her. The main character just wished her luck and smiled again, then moved towards the exit. Eventually, they passed by, and suddenly the young lady turned around. Lulu called out to the teenager just as unexpectedly, and a surprised Shuai turned to her. The girl asked him to stay with her for a little while, which again presented him with a difficult task. After all, the right thing to do was to leave, and he realized this. But his heart, as always, told him otherwise. Finally, Gao collected his thoughts and refused her, asking for forgiveness. Lin was in shock, after which she literally began to persuade him to give her a couple of minutes. Fu sighed heavily, but he couldn't help himself and slowly walked towards her. After which they went back into the elevator, and the girl pressed the floor she needed, and the doors began to close. They stood silently and looked at the floor, not knowing what to say and not understanding whether it was necessary. Suddenly, Lulu started talking, but at that very moment something strange happened to the elevator. The characteristic sound of iron rubbing appeared, and then the elevator completely fell down. The young people were shocked by this turn of events and did not know what to do. Confused, Lin rushed into the teenager's arms, thinking that these were the last seconds of their lives. Shuai also hugged her. The elevator fell down at an incredible speed, creating the same grinding sound. But at a certain point, the elevator cabin suddenly stopped, and it all ended. Gao breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that the elevator was stuck between floors. A frightened Lin said that she had already prepared herself for the worst, but fortunately everything turned out well. Fu noted that he had already pressed the emergency call button, and that they would soon be pulled out of here. In fact, he himself was no less scared than she was, but he tried his best not to show it. Suddenly, Lulu grabbed the guy's hand. He thought that Lin was still afraid. At this point, Shuai smiled and tried to calm the poor girl down. However, a moment later, she bit his hand, which left him puzzled. Naturally, Fu asked why she did this and what was going on.